Okay, so I
How do you,
put a link to the,
uh,
go ahead.
how do you exit a program in Quorum very quickly?
What is the hotkey, William, for the game?
No, not hotkey. Programmatically exit.
Oh, is that
Be a
the,
way to do it.
there's a way, there's a
If you're trying to quit out of a game, I believe it's quit game. I would have to double check that real quick.
Okay.
that sounds right. There's also a, an
I've been
exit.
able to just do Alt F4. It's worked.
He means
Yeah.
programmatically, like, not have the user do it, but to like have the program quit itself. Is what
The action is called exit.
exit.
Oh, okay.
There's also a way, there's a class called the system helper, and the system helper class has like a
Yes.
quit function or something like that. And that one will let you force quit a program too. But the cleaner way is the exit function in a game if you're using the game class. So
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. So that's what I need, because when I'm reaching my total score, I need to quit.
right. Okay, so the next lesson is actually about adding background music, because that's where we left out that we were going to start on, right? I think.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the first thing, there's a couple things to know about background music that I'll just kind of go over briefly. And I actually think that many of you have already done this kind of stuff, but not all of you. So I just want to make sure that we're on the same page in terms of like how you do this or what it is. And so the very first thing that I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about computer audio, just sort of in brief. And so just to can anyone tell me sort of like how does computer audio work? Like what is it? Like how is audio streamed or played? Like what is that? Adam's like, I don't know.
I mean, it's a stream of bits in the end. I mean, it's a
Stream of bits.
I mean, you're
how it actually gets translated to audio, and I'm actually not sure.
Okay. Steve?
just accessing a file and playing it, basically.
Yeah, but like, how does that work? Like, how does this, like, what does that mean?
There are two ways to do this. One is you embed instructions into a file, which is MIDI, and the waveforms are then generated based on those instructions. The other one is when you have the wave files. I think if you have the WAV format, it probably, I know it's got a header and it's got a bunch of numbers in it, but I'm not too sure what happens after that, because I've seen the wave generator programs in Quorum. They involve a sine curve, but what actually happens once you send all the math to wherever it goes, I am not quite sure about.
Okay, so here's like at a 10,000 foot level, here's how computer audio works. So generally speaking, the computer audio keeps a bunch of numbers around, and these numbers are not a waveform per se. They're just a representation of audio, the strength of an audio signal. And these numbers always go between -1 and 1. Why is that? It's just a convention. Somebody made it up and it kind of stuck around. And -1 and 1, there's nothing special about it. But what that means is that if you wanted to represent something like a sine wave, just a typical thing, then you would have a number that started at 1, and then it would slowly go down to 0, and then slowly go down to -1, and then it would go slowly back up to 0, and then it would go slowly back up to 1, right? And if you wanted other kinds of waveforms, they get increasingly complicated. So a human voice has all sorts of frequency bands that are in there, and those will just make those ones and those numbers between -1 and 1 have a different pattern. That's really all it is. And so what you're doing when you're sending information to the audio system, you're taking pieces of those numbers at a time, and you're saying, send these to a computer program that can send it to the speaker, and that causes vibrations in the speaker. So let me say that again. at a 10,000 foot level, you've got a bunch of numbers in a file or in memory. It doesn't have to be in a file. And those numbers go between -1 and 1, and how they're represented matters, and there's some complexity there. And then those numbers get between -1 and 1 happen at a certain amount at a time. So typical is 44,000 of them a second. And then those get sent off to a computer program that can send it to the speaker and cause that speaker to vibrate in a particular pattern. That's the idea at its core. But there's a couple things to note here. First of all, 44,000 a second is a lot, isn't it? And then what happens if you have multiple channels? What if it's an 8-channel system? What if it's like spatial audio? Does that change? And then in your frame rate, in your games, usually you only have like 30, 40, 60, 100, 200 frames per second. That's a lot smaller than 44,000 a second. So that means somehow you're going to need to interleave those so that you hear a consistent audio. Otherwise, what would happen? What do you think? If you didn't find a way
I think the graphics and the audio would be completely out of sync.
they'd be out of sync, and in the audio you would hear stuttering. Type of stuff. Things like that. Everybody with me so far?
It wouldn't just cause the frame rate to drop for the actual graphic
You
itself?
can do it either way, depending on what you did. Like if you shoved 44,000 or 100,000 or 200,000 for every frame, then you're going to see a drop in the frame rate. If you instead only gave a tiny part of the thing per frame, like one item per frame, then you're going to get a drop in the sound. So it depends on what you did. And actually, for screen reader users, this is kind of an interesting thing too. So you may not know this, but when the screen reader gets information, it goes through what's called a message pump. And it's really similar to the problem for audio, which is why I'm mentioning it. If I press the down arrow on the keyboard, take a wild guess if anybody knows, how many messages does the screen reader send to a computer program? It's like requesting information, stuff like that.
At least 2, one for a key up and key down.
You would think, right? That's what I thought too. Turns out wrong. Turns out that's wrong. But weirdly wrong. So anybody got a guess?
10.
The last time we measured it, it was about 600, right? Now, what is it requesting? All sorts of stuff. But here's the catch. These messages, they bounce back and forth. Sometimes they're requesting information and sometimes you're giving it information, right? And so that becomes tricky because if there's 600 messages and they all have to happen very rapidly, do you interleave them per frame in your animation? Do you take parts of them and put them in Divium one at a time? In order to even make any of these technologies work, we have to actually derive equations about when to send these messages back and forth on these pumps. And the situation is really similar for computer music or computer audio. Okay, so now in the back of your head, I want you to think, okay, I gotta somehow send pieces of this at a time. And this is called streaming. Okay, and we'll get to that in a second. Okay, the next thing I wanna mention is there's a link in this file that's called OGG. And you don't have to read the OGG wiki, but I'm going to pull it up and I'm going to share my screen. I'm not going to turn my screen reader on for this because I'm going to be describing it. It just seems kind of pointless. But I will pull it up so that those that want to see can, just so you can see the page, but you don't have to read the details. OGG is a file format. It's just a way of compressing audio. Does anyone know why OGG exists? There's a good reason for it. There was an older standard called MP3, but OGG came out and became the winner. Does anyone know why?
It's smaller.
It's slower, but that's not a good reason why people would adopt it. Why?
Smaller.
Smaller file
smaller?
size.
Oh, smaller. I'm sorry. I'm not sure if it's smaller. Probably depends on bitrate and stuff, but it might be. I'm not sure.
Lossless, maybe?
No, it's not lossless.
OGG more open source? Was MP3 owned by somebody?
That is the answer. MP3 was under patent for the longest time, and OGG became this alternative that didn't work quite the same way, and it was patent free, and so people are like, aha, let's use that one. And the reason is because without any kind of compression inside of these audio libraries, the files can get pretty dang big. And so it's kind of painful to force your users to download a gigabyte of audio when it could really be just a few megs. So that's basically why people care about something like OGG. Now OGG, there's nothing magic about it, but it's just compressing the ones and zeros inside of that so that there's less of them, and then you deflate that when you're reading it in, and that turns into the actual minus ones to ones that are tossed throughout the system. Now Quorum does all that kind of stuff in the background because it's actually quite painful to do those kind of conversions. They're not trivial at all. And so that's why it's kind of done for you, but nonetheless, just be aware that it exists. The last thing I'm going to mention before we get to actually finding some music is there's a program called Audacity, and you will need it for this. It is not perfectly accessible, but I would call it acceptably accessible. In other words, like it does seem to work with a screen reader, but like there are some parts of Audacity that are hard to get to and stuff like that. But it's when we asked around, it's the best we could find, like the most accessible of them. The only reason we need this for this lesson is in case you get a file that's in a different file format, like MP3 or WAV or whatever, I want you to convert it to OGG so you know how to do that. Because you kind of do this stuff for games all the time anyway. So you don't have to use Audacity. If you have some other way of converting from some file format to OGG, go to town. But I know Audacity can do it, and I know it's reasonably accessible. So that's the way that I'm going to do it for the lesson today. Everybody with me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So Audacity, the link is in there, but I'll toss a link also to the EPIQ Advanced channel so that people can download it if they want to.
So you're talking about getting all the sound effects and music into OGG?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. We put it all into OGG because that's what Quorum can read. We could have
Gotcha.
added a bunch of other file formats, but the thing is, like, converters are easily available, so
Yeah.
why?
We do also
Yeah.
support WAV files if you've got or WAV or however you want to pronounce it, WAV.
Okay.
Which-
Yeah, because all my music's in WAV and all my sound effects are in OGG. So
Yeah, if you have really long audio, WAV files aren't compressed in any way. So like, you know, a 3-minute song is going to be humongous in a WAV file.
oh,
So typically,
Well,
if I'm doing stuff, I like put my my long songs are likely to be in OGG because it's compressed. It won't take up so much space. Short sound effects are usually fine to put in WAV, just because you don't need to compress a 3-second sound clip usually.
right.
Yeah, and you can understand that, like, if you're running, especially the version of Quorum or whatever online, WAV files can get be burdensome for users because you have to download them on every page, so it can be kind of a pain. But even for like video games, right? You know, like if you're a company and you've got, you know, 15,000 voiceovers, well, man, if those aren't compressed, it's going to be like a 30 gig download. And, you know, maybe you don't care, but like it's definitely, it's a space and compression issue for sure. So in any case, okay, the last thing for the sound is we all have to spend a few minutes. I want to spend about 5 minutes each. And I highly recommend we mute our microphones for this. We're going to go through and we're going to look at this site, and you can look at other ones too, called freepd.com. There is absolutely nothing special about freepd.com. The only reason I put it on there is because the songs are copyright free, and so we can use them under a CC0 license for whatever we want. And so we're going to go through and just dig around on it and then try to find a song that you want to actually load in, and then we're going to load it in. So for the next 5 minutes, hopefully no more than that, dig around on freepd.com, find the song that works for you, and then go ahead and download it and get it ready so that you can have really cool music for your game.
Is it FREE papadelta.com?
It's I'll put in a link. It's freepd.com.
No.
No, I clicked on it. FREEP as in I went potty, my kids, and then D as in dog.com. So free and then PD.com.
Yeah.
Oh.
On mine, there's no www in front of it.
I think servers can respond differently, but yeah, there's not on mine either. I just typed freepd.com and it pulled it up. Actually, did I? I clicked on it.
Yeah, got it. No www.
Yep.
Free public domain music. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's what it stands for. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna turn my microphone off to pick my awesome song, but do that. We'll go no more than 5 minutes. So if you're undecided after 5 minutes, then just pick something so that we can kind of keep going. So 5 minutes. Now, if you've already found that perfect tune, try install Audacity as well. I have found the perfect tune, and you can judge me, but it's amazing.
Which one is it?
Oh, you're gonna have to stay tuned past the break. Are commercials even like fair jokes anymore? Because like, who watches cable, right? Like, I haven't had cable since 2002.
I mean, Hulu has plenty of commercials though. So.
Yeah, I don't have Hulu. Yeah, I only have the commercial-free ones. Do you do Hulu?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Okay. What do you like about Hulu? I never really saw the
I
draw.
don't know. They've got a number of different programs that my wife likes to watch. So I just watch whatever she's watching on there. But there's a lot of commercials because we don't pay for like the commercial-free version, which is $20-something more or something like that.
Oh wow, so it's considerably
Also,
more expensive.
Yeah, and they also do have like day after NBC shows, things like that. So Saturday Night Live and stuff like that comes out on Sunday night.
Gotcha. Didn't they just make their own service, Peacock or something like that?
I don't know about that. Maybe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we have Disney Plus and Netflix, I think. So I like those services, but neither have commercials, which, for kids especially, it's like, I don't want my kids to see any commercials. It just feels like, why?
Houston, we have a problem.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Cloudflare is Audacity is behind Cloudflare. Cloudflare is coming up with a weird captcha.
Okay, well then I'm gonna send you. Oh, you're on Windows, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you the installer manually.
Okay.
Let's see here.
And so at this point, once we've selected our thing, should we be opening it in Audacity?
Yep.
Trying to do. Okay, cool.
Yeah, because they are MP3 downloads. You'll have to convert them to OGG.
Yep. Pranav, it's sending it to you. It's at 20%. It'll probably be, I don't know.
No problem.
Yeah.
It'll come.
It'll come, yeah. It's like, oh, you know what? I should put it on Zoom, actually. Because then anybody that needs it can get it, right?
How are you sending it to me? Email?
Slack.
Slack. Okay, I have Slack open.
Okay, and I'm putting it up on Zoom right now, too. So that'll be a bit of a process, but it's getting there. So if anybody else.
Now,
it's almost.
Where should I be? Should be in resources where I should, audio. Found it.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, just export the audio file.
I'm going to go over how to do it in just a moment. So yeah, I'm just kind of I'm giving everybody just another minute or so to get it going because I know people are still installing.
Anybody else downloading on Mac? Because when I hit download on FreePD, it doesn't download. It just plays it.
You have to right click on the dumb thing or like whatever, browse to it and then do the context pop-up. I forget the key. Pop-up menu thing and then say save link as and then it'll.
Oh, okay.
And is that intuitive? No, it's not. But it's also $0. So that's why I put it up there. Okay, now the file is up on Zoom. Anybody that wants it can grab it from there, or it's up. I sent it to Pranav manually on Slack as well. if you're not able to get it for whatever reason on
I'm in the general channel. Where do I have to go to?
I sent it to
Get-
you personally, like your private, like a message. But if it's easier, just grab it up on Zoom, man.
Are you using the desktop client? On
Yes, I
Slack?
am. I am.
Do an Alt-Shift-Up arrow. It should navigate you to the next unread message.
No. Dude, we really should have had Timothy give us like a screen reader Slack tutorial before we started. It's like it has been. It's not like it doesn't work. It's just like there's a learning curve.
There is, yeah. It
Okay,
takes playing with and lots of Googling.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So Timothy, how do I get to my private messages?
So as I say, oh,
Sorry, I turned on share screen because I'm about to go to the next piece. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next part just so we don't lose too much time. On my screen right now is Audacity, and the things that you have to do for Audacity are relatively small, and that's why it can be largely accessible, because there are some features in Audacity that don't, as far as I can tell, I can't get to work with a screen reader. It's possible that all of it does secretly and that I'm just not doing it correctly, but I don't think so. But it works mostly for any of the things that we care about. And so let's see here. Where's my file? I'm clicking on, oh wait, sorry, I should have actually said what I did. I went to File, and then I went to Open. And then I'm looking for my file, which in my case is called arpent.mp3. When I open that bugger, it makes a picture on the screen that looks like a bunch of wobbly lines. That's the waveform. That's the -1s to 1s. And you can see that even in Audacity, there's a thing that goes from 1 to -1. And it's exactly what we were talking about earlier. Note that for a music file, there are 2 channels on the screen. And this is a weird thing about sound and Quorum. For music, that's fine. However, be aware that anytime that you want spatial audio, it must be a mono file. You can convert to mono, but it must be a mono file. And that hopefully makes sense. Why? Because you're actually pushing it to the sounds to different channels. So if it was 2 channels, it would have to convert it down to 1 before it knew where to push it anyway. Because that's basically a different way of controlling the channels. So the point is, just don't forget, this is 2 channels, it's music, that's fine, doesn't matter. But if you want spatial audio, which we'll talk about later, you have to have a mono sound. Right? You have to have a mono sound. Okay. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to just go up to, I'm going to press select all, which is A, and I'm not even sure if I have to do that. I'm going to go to export, and then file, export, and then I'm going to go export as OGG. So file, export, export as OGG. And when I do that, it gives me a location, and I'm going to put the same file name on my desktop. And that's it. So I'm going to save that. And when it does that, it also asks, like, do I want to change meta tags for anything? And like, if you want to, you can, but it doesn't matter. And I'm just going to press enter. And then it says that it's exporting. And ta-da, I'm done. That's it. That's all I need Audacity for. So really, all I'm using Audacity for in this case is just converting the file format. There is a bazillion things you can do with Audacity, but that's not what we're going to do right now. Okay.
Stefan, quick question.
Yeah.
Do you have to select all before you do the conversion, or can you just automatically go to export and export?
No, I'm not actually sure. I just, by habit, I do select all, and
you don't need to.
You don't. Okay.
No.
Right.
The only thing you need to worry about selecting for is, I think there's a separate export selected command that cares about your selection.
That must be what it is. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Now we've got a Quorum Studio. I'm going to pull up Quorum Studio. I wonder what version I have. Okay, good. That version. can ignore that I have the website up. I must have been pushing a patch on this machine. And you'll notice all the status messages have changed because I was bored for a half hour. So what the heck? There we go. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to get set up with a program. And I'm going to open a project from the EPIQ thing. And I think that you were solving some of the problems a little bit different than were in the thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and quickly turn my screen off. And then I'm going to pull up the background music one, and I'm going to delete all the lines for the answers so that we can rewrite them. Which will not take me a whole heck of a lot of time. Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to share my screen again. Share sound. Okay, now on the screen, what you see is I've got a game that's very similar to yours. I think you all are solving problems slightly differently. I think I wrote my distance equation manually or something, or I don't know, whatever. But nonetheless, it's all pretty similar. And when I run this particular game, in my case, it pulls it up and it's just got my map and it looks like I can move around and stuff like that. Looks like my physics is slightly finicky, but whatever. In this version. So what I want to do is, I want to actually load a sound file. In order to do that, the first thing that I need to do is I can't actually put the file inside, you add the file to my project inside of Quorum Studio. So I have to find my project on disk and manually move the file to somewhere. And I got to keep mentally track of where that is. So in my case, I've got my EPIQ, just the raw EPIQ thing, and I'm going to put the file that I had into a folder called resources and then sounds. And I'm going to move my arpent.ogg into there. If my computer doesn't crash or whatever it's deciding to do right now. What the hell? Did Windows Explorer crash? Wow.
And that's inside your project, right?
That's inside my project. Although this isn't Quorum Studio, this is just plain old Windows Explorer, and it appears to have crashed on me. Lovely.
So you're putting it into the resources folder that is inside your project?
Yep. And you can put it anywhere in your project. It doesn't actually matter. We'll get to why that it doesn't matter in a minute, but
is resources just kind of the folder to put it in? Like, is it?
No, there's really not. There's literally nothing special about it at all.
Okay.
But okay, there we go. Okay, I don't know why it did that, but the only reason we need to keep track of where it was is because we're gonna have to code it. And so we have to tell Quorum where it is. And so here's the funny thing. Whenever I'm loading a file in Quorum, the thing to know is that the file's locations, by default, are always relative to the executable, except when you're running it from within Quorum Studio, and there's a good reason for this, and I'll explain that. And then it's relative to the project's location, and that's because of differences in deployment. So inside of Quorum Studio, I might have a folder called resources, and then inside of it a folder called sounds or tile sets. And inside of that thing, that means whenever I'm using a file path, I need to actually say that it's resources / sounds / whatever. Okay. So let me go back to our tutorial. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to, in order to code this, I'm going to note that the activity actually has reference to a streaming tutorial, and I'm just going to pull it up just so people can see what's in it. And the streaming tutorial, which is on my screen now, has a couple of headers, playing longer audio, streaming, and really that's about it, actually. And then inside of it, it uses a class called the audio class with a capital A, and it uses a function that's called load to stream. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go to a field in my class. I'm at line 30, and then I'm right below all my potions in this particular case. And I'm going to say capital A audio space, then I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to call mine song. When I do that, it pulls up there's a hint, and the hint is just for the use statement. And it provides you two options, and this is why I want to point this out. When I do this, there's two options. It says add use for libraries.sound.audio or add use for libraries.web.page.audio. Which one, if we didn't just press Alt-Enter, which one would we choose?
The first one?
The one, yeah, on the top.
Yeah, so it is the first one, and the libraries.web.page.audio is if you're writing a web page and you want an audio tag. But here's why I mention this. Every blue moon, there are two classes in Quorum that are named the same thing, and a use statement, the only way we can generate those is to basically guess which one. If you press to Alt-Enter in this particular case, it actually would guess correctly. However, it is at least theoretically possible that it could not. So if you're ever doing Alt-Enter and it's the wrong one, be aware that that is mathematically possible for that to occur.
That happened with the list. I was like trying to like figure out why my list wasn't working. It kept telling me there was no, no generics for it. And I don't remember where the list was coming from, but it was not containers.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And so that is possible. So I'm going to do libraries.sound.audio, and then I've got my song. Now, inside of my game, note that I've got main, create game, update, and press and release key. Where do you think I should load my audio?
Create
Each of
game,
those actions. Why create game?
because you want it running from the start as background. We're doing background music, right?
Yeah, you want background music. Yeah, so
And
that's
you
right.
only want to do it once.
And you only want to do it once. Okay. So now if I go back to the streaming tutorial, the function it says to call is load to stream and then double quote sound/longsong.og, and then it calls play. But here's the thing. So inside of this path that it gives, we need to make ours relative to our stuff. So I'm going to say song : and then load to stream. And notice that when you call load to stream, there's actually 6 load functions. There's load audio samples, load file, load text file path, and then there's load to stream with the same function. So let's talk about these really quickly just to make sure that you kind of understand. So first of all, what is an audio samples? Does anybody know what that is? In Quorum. If you aren't aware of it, Quorum actually has, if I can pull it up, if you want to go completely and totally nuts with audio in your applications, Quorum has a set of tutorials on how to do digital signal processing. And that I'm going to pull up and I'll put it in the chat just so people can know it exists. That is starts at version 6 of the, oh wait, there it is. Oh, stop it. Chat. Version 6 of the audio tutorials. And inside of that, it shows you how to do sine waves and white noise and all this kind of stuff inside of Quorum. And the point is, if you generate very long files, you may very well want to stream them. So you can actually send in to an audio object any arbitrary audio samples that you can create of any kind and variety that you can possibly imagine. And this encompasses the full set of all possible audio that could ever be generated. So even though a kid isn't going to necessarily do this out of the gate, at least not without a little bit more knowledge, the point is, if you want to go simple, you can just load a song and like fire it up. If you want to go more complicated, you can do everything low level in the system too and do whatever you can imagine. So that's the audio samples. The next is, there's the difference between load and load stream, load to stream. Does anybody have a guess there?
Load to stream will do it slowly from disk in chunks. It'll pick up audio in chunks and load.
Yeah.
Load will do it immediately.
That's exactly right. If you call load, it takes the entire audio file and it dumps it into memory. If you do load to stream, then it'll do it in chunks. That's right. And this is where this interleaving comes into play. So we're actually going to call the load to stream with the text file path there. So I'm going to go load to stream. I'm going to add 2 double quotes. And then I'm going to put in my location, which is resources / oh shit, what was it?
Sounds?
Was it sounds?
I think so.
I think I just swore on the recording. I didn't even think about it. Sounds, and then I don't remember what mine was even called. arpent.og. Oops, arpent.og. Okay. Now when I do this, it loads to stream, but it's not going to do anything. So if I click play right now, if I run my program, there will be no sound.
Really quick, just to make sure, you're calling load to stream on the audio object that we created above, right?
Correct. So I called mine song, and I will put my line of code into the channel. Let's see here. And I can turn on a screen reader too if you prefer. I've been audio describing it, but if you prefer one or the other, that's fine.
And
so
we put that line into the action create game, right?
Yep. I put mine. Oh, your line numbers are going to be different than mine.
Right.
But I put mine right before the keyboard listener in my particular code. But it doesn't actually matter. You can toss it anywhere in create game and it's just fine. Okay, so that's song load to stream left parent double quote resources / sounds / arpent.og. Was it sound? Yeah, sounds. Okay. All right, everybody.
So if I didn't have a sound subfolder, as long as I put it just in resources and put that part of as the file, I'm okay.
Yeah, that's fine. You can put it wherever you want. You just have to know where it is. All right. So then we're going to go back to the tutorial. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to call play on that sound. And I want all of you to do this, and then I want you to see what it does. So I'm going to call play. So under that load to stream, I'm going to say song : play. Oh, by the way, I should mention this. There's play and then play until done. What's the difference?
Shoot. Oh, it is. The play until done is gonna play the duration of the song, but it's hold the other function of the program.
Yeah, that's right. So it blocks. They call that blocking in computer science. It blocks the rest of the process from doing anything. But why on earth would you want that? Why would you want that?
There's some situation that's well, because that's you know, if the program runs in the way it's supposed to, and the audio start playing, and then program goes to the next task, that's going to cut off the audio.
Yeah, that's right. So the point is there's sometimes some simple applications where that's what you want it to do. You just want it to play and then you don't want it to do anything else. And that's okay. Or sometimes you want things to happen in a sequence, like play this one, then that one, then that one. And so this is another way of doing sequencing. But most of the time you want play. And so I put song : play. And if I run this, what do I expect is going to happen? Because it's kind of counterintuitive. What do I expect is going to happen?
The song should play only once.
Play only once. Okay. Other ideas?
If
Okay,
you have something in the update,
I
that's
do not have
fine.
any. I have nothing in the update. I am only calling play after load to stream.
It's only playing a portion of it.
Yeah, so let's run it and see what happens. What the hell? I'm so pissed off. My program is broken. This
It
is
played
what-
once.
It did, right? This is what I'm talking about with interleaving. This is what I'm talking about with interleaving. So what we need to do to make sure that there's this basically thing under the hood, this piece of memory that needs to be fed. It's like Seymour or something. And it needs to be fed information. So what we're going to do is inside of update, we're going to say song : and we're going to call this function called stream. Because that means on every frame, it's going to feed that buffer a little bit more information. And then we're going to be able to play our music. And
So you're going to say song : stream inside update,
Yep.
and
that
then
update-
song : play.
No additional play. You've already called play, so it's playing. Now we just got to feed the stream.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to play it now, and then it should all work fine. Now you rock out. And ta-da, we got background music.
Song.
So 4 lines of code. That's it. 5 if you include the use statement.
I have a question. What if that music changes?
What do you mean?
So in the update statement, I don't know. Let's say you're going from this to, I don't know, let's say battle music. And I want different music.
Oh yeah, you can stop it and do all that kind of stuff too.
I guess my question would be, I mean, do you just use the same audio object that you created above and then just load a new file and just keep that stream call in update? Or
you know, the honest truth is I don't think it'll matter that much. You can kind of do it however you want. It should be fine. That would be my guess. So
okay, I guess I'm just like looking at that stream call and update, and I'm like, I don't know, does that put you in a box and bound to that particular like sound? Like,
that's a good question. I don't know if you, so it probably depends on how you do it. Like if the audio samples could allow you to stream in perpetuity, and you could just fill that buffer as you go, and then you can stream forever. If it's specifically loading a song and the buffer ends or something, maybe you can call reload. I'm not sure. I haven't really done that. I just make new objects. What is it, William?
So if you wanted to do something along these lines, you have a couple of options. One of them is, like you're saying, you could just use multiple objects. And if you're going to be using these music tracks repeatedly throughout the course of the game, it's probably worthwhile to just make the new objects. They're not that heavyweight to keep the stream stuff around, because that's the entire point of the streams, is it's not going to keep that much in memory for each one.
right.
So the easiest thing to do is just make different objects for each one. But if you wanted to, you could use the same audio for multiple songs. And if you did that, you would just have to dispose the audio in order to get rid of the content it's currently holding onto. Just flush that buffer and get rid of the old stuff. And then you could load the new audio in and start streaming from that one.
If you had multiple audio objects, how would you handle that in update then? I guess you just have to have some condition to...
Let's do it. Why talk about it when we could do it?
Before you do that, I did not get an error when I had play, but I did get an error after I put in stream.
What's the error?
Giving me a class Java lang
But not load sign file with
and
path.
initializer error.
Can you copy paste the error into Slack?
Uh-huh.
Is it an exception initializer error?
Yeah, it has to do with initializer.
Yeah. Are you updated to the most current version of Quorum Studio?
Yes, I updated this morning.
Did you spell the name wrong? That's the first thing I always check.
This error looks like the same thing that I fixed in the 2.0.1 patch where it was doing the update before it called create game.
Oh. Can you share your
Because
screen?
Denise Robinson posted in the support channel that she had a similar error.
Can you share your screen real quick?
I sure can.
See if it's. Oh, wait. Clean and build your project.
Do a clean build?
Yep, do a clean and build. I bet I know what it is.
It'll
It'll be the trash can with a
trash
wrench
can.
icon.
Okay.
Yep. And once you do that, then click run again and let's see if it still occurs.
All right, then we'll do run. Yep, that worked.
Sweet. Yeah, so let me explain why that happened. So if we change, so one of the things that Quorum does to try to make your programs load a little faster is if it's already got a copy of the standard library below your program and it already sees that it's there, it doesn't try to blow it away on every time you click compile, otherwise that'd be really slow. So what that means is if you update Quorum Studio, sometimes the very first time you might want to consider clicking clean and build. Most of the time it doesn't matter, but clicking clean and build, and then that will blow away that standard library and then regenerate it if there's a new version of the compiler in there. So,
okay.
All right, so
one moment. The path has to be resources / sounds / whatever.
Yep.
Okay, I did something interesting.
I have now finished Timothy's request, and I have 2 songs playing at the same time. I don't really know what will happen, but let's find out. Yeah! See, that was awesome. I'm very glad we did that experiment, and I'm going to turn that code off and never touch it ever again.
I guess part of my question was more along the lines of like, if I wanted to have map music and then if I got into battle, I wanted to suddenly start streaming battle music instead of map music.
Yeah, it's not a problem. You just call, I think it's stop is what I think it is.
Yeah, so you could either stop or pause, whichever one you want to stop playing. And then in your update loop or your streaming, it doesn't hurt to keep streaming it, but if you didn't want to, you could just use a conditional to check to see if that audio is currently playing. Okay. And if it's not playing, then don't stream it.
Okay,
yeah.
So if it's stopped and it's still calling that stream method, it's just not going to do anything?
I believe so, although I haven't actually tried that. So,
okay.
Or if I have, it's not been recently enough that I remember what happened.
Got it.
I think it's harmless, but
interesting. But you can always just check where stopped.
All right. Okay, so that is the end of adding music to our tutorial. Are there any other questions about adding music?
One caveat. In case you're me, which you're not, but just in case you are, and say, okay, I'm going to be super smart. I will paste the entire path of the file. Don't do that because it duplicates the path.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
No, I'm telling you. What it does is, so my project is under C:\users /pranav /documents /Quorum Studio, blah, blah, blah. Now, I picked up this whole thing and I put it into load stream.
Okay. I know what you're talking about. So, okay, when you use files, this is what I was trying to say earlier, is that when you call that load to stream and you only put in text there, that's a relative path to the location of the executable. If you want an absolute path, there's a different way you have to do it, and I'll show you how to do that right now. Okay, so if I want to make this an absolute path, then what I need to do is I need to use the file class. And so I say file, and then, oops. Oh, why is it not? Oh, do I already have files? Maybe I have files. Oh, I do. Okay. File, audio file. And in my audio file, I call set absolute path, and then that's it. And then I can pass that instead to load to stream, and it will pick it up, and you'll be good to go.
Okay.
So you either use load to stream, which has basically a helper action for the current directory structure, or you call absolute path on the file, and then you can pass the file along.
Okay.
How do you control volume?
So any of these audio objects have quite a few functions, so we can look at them really quick. So I always do this by just pulling up the code completion, so I can mention them. There's add to queue, compare, disable Doppler. There's Doppler effects you can employ. Disable Doppler listener. You can listen to how Doppler is occurring. There's a looping command, dispose, enable Doppler. There's get balance, left and right channels, current audio samples, so that you can like take your file and then convert it to audio samples type objects so that you can manipulate them in digital signal processing. There's default, because like if you have that, you can do like anything you can possibly imagine. There's default maximum volume distance. This has to do with like roll off when you're in 3D games. You want it to automatically compute distances. Default roll off rates, fade, listener directions, direction XYZ, listener positions, listener up, listener velocities, maximum volume distance, pitch. You can change the pitch for like whatever it is, chipmunk style effects and stuff. Positions, roll off rates, rotations. I forget what the rotation is on there, but whatever. Velocities, you get the idea. There's quite a bit of stuff. Is Doppler enabled, is playing, is loaded, is streaming. I'm only to L. I'm not going to read them all, but I think you get the idea.
And there's set volume down there a little ways.
Yeah.
Set volume.
Set volume. Yeah.
What does set volume take?
One number between 0 and 1.
Got it.
Yeah.
Is there a way to get the current screen reader volume, maybe with the accessibility manager?
The current screen reader? What do you mean? Like the name of it?
Current screen reader volume.
Oh, current screen reader volume? I don't think so. So the accessibility manager can connects down to the system, at least on Windows, it's called UIA. And UIA can feed and receive information from the screen reader, but it's not the best API in the world that Microsoft puts out. And so you don't really get a lot of control over screen readers. They kind of designed it that way on purpose so that you as an application programmer can't really force the screen reader to give you information, in part because I suspect most programmers just don't even mess with it. And so they wouldn't even know what to do with it and they would just screw it up, or at least that's the argument that I've heard before. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but because of that, there's a lot of code inside of UIA that like doesn't work, doesn't do what it's supposed to, that like just stuff like that. And so in the case of telling the screen reader to change volume, that's probably the realm of like a script, like an NVDA Python script or a JAWS script or stuff like that. But you can't really do it straight from the raw operating system commands, which is what Quorum uses behind the scenes.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but that's what I think.
Yeah, because what happened now was I got the music running, but then I couldn't hear my characters. So.
Oh yeah. Well, so in that particular case, I would lower the volume on the music, but you're right. Like you would want it to maybe like intelligently know when one or the other is talking or something like that. Is that kind of what you're imagining?
I'm imagining getting the volume and then saying, okay, the music should be 5% below the volume of whatever the current speech volume.
Like auto, what is it? Auto ducking.
Auto ducking.
Sort of.
It's called.
Yeah,
sort of.
If there's a way to get the volume directly of what the screen reader is using, I don't know of what it is. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at the API for NVDA specifically and what they provide in the DLL, and I don't recall volume even being one of them.
Because I think they just use the system volume, don't they?
No, they use the system volume, which used to pop up in volume control till Microsoft changed the user interface. Yeah, I mean, you probably have to look at a system API call somewhere, so no problem.
I don't know. I would recommend what I'm doing right now is just adding like F7 and F8 as volume keys for the music. So you can just control that from within the game.
Okay, so
Okay.
this stuff aside, yeah, that's a good way to do it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to trigger sounds from objects. But before I do that, I want to give everybody a chance to take a few-minute break. And by give everyone a chance to take a few-minute break, what I really mean is that I need more tea. And so I'm going to go get more tea. So I will be back in about 3 to 5 minutes and give everybody a chance, like take a pee break or whatever you need to do for you. And so 5 minutes at the most, and then we'll be back. Everybody.
And can William or somebody take a look at mine for a second? I'm having an issue.
I believe in Stefik's ability to take a look at your stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, I can look. What's up?
I'll be right back.
I'm getting variables already been defined in class main, and it's not.
Are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, yeah, so I am here.
Looks like you have on line 52, you have an extra quotation mark that you shouldn't have in the middle of that file.
Oh shit! At the beginning.
Not at the beginning. It's the one in the middle that's the issue.
Oh.
Is that quotation part? Those quotation marks, are those part of the file name?
No.
Yeah. So remove that one and put that one at the beginning back, and keep the one that's there, because this is a string, right? It's the same thing as what you're doing in like the set path on line 49, where you're setting the path of the scene.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
See.
Okay, go ahead and build it. We'll see what happens. Yeah, looks good.
Cool. Okay. All right. Cool. Thanks.
Yep. No problem.
Step sheet.
Okay. Does anyone know how to implement a radar-like function for my character? Because I don't know where the first mushroom is that he has to find.
When you
So
say radar-like function, what exactly are you thinking in terms of the radar?
what I'm thinking is when so let's say I hit a key and I say, okay, search to your left. So what is how far is the next object? Because I have a bunch of blank space on the grid. So how far is the next object, or where is the next object?
So if you wanted to do something like that, there's a bunch of different ways that we could try and implement something radar-like, which is why I was asking for something specific. If I am understanding what you want to do correctly, the most obvious way for me to do it, which is maybe not the best in terms of like performance or something, if we sat down and really crunched it out, we could probably find some other way to do it. But I think that in terms of what you're looking to do, if you basically did what we did before, where you iterate through the scenes, you find where the mushrooms are, for each one, you're going to want to calculate a distance, which is using the same sort of approach that we did before.
Yeah.
And then you want to be able to put those values into some structure so you can compare which one is the smallest value and report the smallest of those distance values, right? That's only going to give you just the most basic, getting, hot, cold sort of radar. That won't tell you what direction you need to go. That would be a separate thing we'd have to figure out, which we could if we wanted to take the time and check out the math.
I'll tell you how I was thinking of doing it.
Sure.
Which was, the coordinates of the item, that I know where I am, okay?
Yes.
What I would do would be, I would go to layer 2D and check what is the index of that item. And that's where I got thrown off. I couldn't figure out how to get an index of that particular item 2D in the layer 2D. And once I knew that, I could then sort of iterate to the previous item and do a comparison and so on.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And the other thing, which besides this, so I tried, okay, get origin X, get origin Y, and then
Oh, yeah. The origin X and origin Y commands do not do what they sound like they do. They're used in the internal guts of the engine, and what they do is their purpose has changed since the function was first named, and it's not really obvious what it does. That's used for figuring out the basically the center of mass for physics.
oh, okay.
Yeah, which is super confusing, but
okay, whatever. So
yeah.
then I could simply do a get X, get Y, and then since I know what my origin is on that layer 2D, so I was somehow thinking of figuring that bit out. And there is a function to do this, get item at something, but it wants an input also.
Yeah, that's used by the system to handle stuff like mouse input detection.
If you want all items on the layer, you can also call get items and get an iterator back. It'll just give them all to you.
Yeah, so we did go over yesterday how we could get all of the
Yeah.
items in an iterator, but specifically the question is how can we get items that are well, honestly, with what you're describing for this like radar approach where you want to get the distance to the closest one, I'm trying to understand, is there what in particular would fail about that if we just did it the iterator way? Because I can imagine like you had your loop with the iterator, and then you could even just like have a number that is the shortest distance, and then you set that to a really large value to start, and then whenever you find an item which distance is smaller than that, you just override the distance value, and then you just report that at the end, right?
No, what I would want to do would be scan to the left.
A scan to the left. Okay.
Scan up, scan down, scan right. So I want to be able to scan in all 4 directions.
I am enjoying this conversation, but we should probably move on to the next piece so that we can talk.
Oh yeah,
get through.
We'll schedule this for the interview.
Sure. Okay. All right. So the next thing on the list is we're going to trigger sounds from objects. Now I have to change my plan from this lesson a little bit because I think you all already did this, or at least I recall yesterday you kind of did this. Notably, I think what all of you already did is you already added collisions into your games. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, a little bit.
There's some.
Okay, so I think that what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to, since you've already added collisions, I'm going to add a basic collision. Then I'm just going to really show you how, I'm going to focus on how to hook up the sound effects in your games, because it's just slightly different than running streaming music. It's slightly different than that. And so just like before, the first thing I want to pull up is this thing. The learning objectives, learn about hooking in sound effects, how to remove items from a game after a collision, and then learning about arrays. So notably, we're going to, in this one, I don't know what all you've put in your games, like potions or swords or the head of Sina Baram, I don't know, whatever. And of any of these items, we're going to remove them from the game when we're done, but we're also going to play a sound effect when we do it after it's collided. And as part of this, I'm going to first find some sound effects. We're going to do the same thing that we did before, except this time, the ones that I found were on a site called Free Sound. And I'm going to put up a link to that in Slack and in the Zoom. And of course, you can grab stuff wherever you damn well please, right? Whatever works for you makes sense. The only reason that I pull up something like Free Sound is because it's not expensive. I mean, it's free, if I recall. And so on this site, you'll see that there's freesound.com, there's sounds, forums, people, help, and there's a search sounds. And so oftentimes I just kind of pull this up and just look at stuff. So here's lasers. So cool. The first one is
Could
heavy.
you
laser
show your
sound.
screen so I can kind of see where you're?
I'm sorry. I thought I was. I apologize.
That's right.
Here is a laser sound, and I think it lets you play it. A lot of the sounds on freesound.com are, I don't know how to say it, slightly lame. And a lot of them need to be adjusted, but they're also free. And like when you're trying to just make a game and add some fun stuff to it or cues or anything like that, it's something. You get the idea. Let's see. So there's also lots of sounds on Freesound that do stuff like this. So you might just actually want one of those. So sometimes when you use freesound.com, you actually have to do some editing on the sound in order to do this. And I don't want to give an accessibility tutorial on this because quite frankly, I'm not really super experienced with using Audacity in general. But nonetheless, the point is that like the freesound.com sounds are not perfect, but they'll be good enough for our lesson today. So what I would like to do first is I'd like everybody, if possible, to go through Freesound for just a few minutes, or if not this site, find some other site and find at least one sound that they can use inside of their game. So
It's freesound.com.
No, not .com, but .org. I'm sorry.
Ah,
I'm not sure.
.com is for sale.
.com is for sale.
I noticed there was a login to download, so we need to create a login to use these.
I think you do, and that's not
Yes,
exactly
you do.
ideal, but nonetheless, like it's still they're free, and so that's the advantage.
Yeah, that's where I got my sounds from last night.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I will probably pull up one that has sounds already in it because that way I don't have to go back and re-download them. But yes, so the first 5 minutes or so, find yourself a song, make a little account, and if I will post in the sound that I used into Zoom. So if you don't want to like mess with it, then just grab the sound that I have, and then you can use it. So I will do that right now. Okay. And the chat. Holy crap, why is it? Boy, my Windows Explorer has been crashing like mad today. I don't even know why. That's strange. Okay, but probably about 3 minutes left, and then we'll move on. Even if you don't have something, you gotta get there. Okay, so I added in potion.og. It sounds like this, like that. Not a riveting sound, but a functional one. Okay, so if you need it, it's in the Zoom chat.
At one point, I don't know if you, Andy, or Will could take a look at my logic for like trying to set up volume controls within the game. And I know I've tried doing this before using like Pygame and Python and had similar problems. All I'm doing is just adding or subtracting, 0.1. And it is giving me all kinds of grief.
Yeah, go ahead and share a screen while we wait, dude.
Okay. So.
Oh my God,
audio-
don't share that. Everybody will know.
What?
I'm just,
So mean, Stiffic.
I know, I'm a terrible person.
It's like, wait, what? What am I doing?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. So all I have is a number variable up here, music volume. Here's my audio, map music.
Yep.
Um,
Good, and yeah, there we go.
so down here. So F7, I want to lower music volume. So I'm going to subtract negative 0.1 or subtract 0.1. If it's greater than 0,
Yeah, that doesn't seem crazy.
right? Shouldn't that work?
It seems like it
And-
should to me. Do you know if that set volume ever fires?
Yeah, it does. It's working, although it seems like it's lowering past it's like this condition isn't working because it's lowering past, because it's like if I press F7 too many times, and I have to press F8 several times before I ever hear audio again, because I'm guessing it's lowering past the past 0.
Well, there's a couple things at play here. First of all, this isn't obvious at all, but human beings actually don't perceive audio linearly. And I know that sounds wonky, but like what I mean is that if you're incrementing your volume and decreasing it by a constant value, which is linear. And so, believe it or not, actually humans hear and understand both volume and pitch as exponential functions.
Really?
Yeah, it's true. That's why an octave in music is the doubling of a frequency for every octave. And that's why decibels and stuff like that are done with exponential functions as well. That's just how humans perceive it for whatever reason. So lowering it by minus 0.1 is actually going to sound a little bit funny to your ears.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that you could do is you could have or double the volume on everything, or raise it by like a certain percentage of
I see.
values, and that might work a little bit better. But if you're perceiving that it is going down or up, then it is working, and it's just a matter of tuning those numbers in the right way so that you perceive it how you want it to.
One other thing as well here. What Stefik just said about perception is totally true, but you were saying in particular that if you press F7 a whole bunch, it eventually the volume hits 0, and it seems like if you press 7 more, you have to hit F8 a whole bunch of times before it starts coming back.
Yeah.
So in your code here, your condition checks to see if it's greater than or equal to 0 to set the volume, but that variable is still going down even if it was at 0, right?
Oh, yeah.
Music
it
volume
is.
minus 0.1, you could get that all the way down, like
Yeah.
20 or something. You press it enough, even if it's not setting the volume.
I needed to move that into the condition.
You know what? It's funny. I didn't even notice that, but that's totally.
Thank you. And yeah, I may switch that to.
But also, the
multiplying.
perception thing is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything you said is
Yeah.
true. It's just
Just
So
not.
what do you
that's
think?
not
It's like
good.
multiplying by like 3 or something, or 0.3. I mean.
Yeah, something like that. I think that's something like that would be rational.
0.2 or something like that.
Yeah, the current number times point whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, not
Do I
0.2, but probably 1.2, right?
Oh, right. And then, do I need to round that?
No, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
The volume system won't care.
Cool.
Okay, so let's go on to the next part. And so I'm going to steal screen sharing back again. Mwahaha. Okay, and so there's a couple things I want to point out in my code, just so that people know that it exists. And notably, you can't see it if you're a blind user, but if you look on my screen, there are annotations through the screen reader as well. Inside of my code on line 35, there's actually a red marking. And through the screen reader, it'll give you oral indication of what's going on. But for any of those, what are
Cutting
these
out pretty bad,
markings?
at least for me.
What was that?
You're
Have to keep
cutting
cut
out pretty
bad
bad.
there.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
we
cutting
couldn't-
out. I'm sorry. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Mostly, I
Um,
think.
okay, I was talking about there's some markings that are in the file. They're visual markings, but the screen reader can get access to these too. And visually they're red, and the screen reader actually uses words, so I don't want to say those because it'll give stuff away. What does a red marking mean inside of an editor like this? Anybody have a guess?
A breakpoint? It's not breakpoint.
You would think so. It's not a breakpoint, but that's a good guess because breakpoints are red as well. A bug, it is not a bug. It is a feature. Although sometimes the difference between those things are not as clear as you'd think, right? Right. So this is because I have connected this program to GitHub. And this is telling me I have deleted a line of code. And inside of the program, if I'm a screen reader user, I can jump to these using Control-Shift-I and Control-Shift-K. And it will jump you to points in the code where you've got a diff. So like if I'm writing code on GitHub in Quorum Studio and I want to shift between where my last change was, I can go to the next status with Control-Shift-I or Control-Shift-K, and it will jump me to any point where I've changed things since the last commit. That was a little feature we added in there. I just want to make sure people know about it. Does that make sense? I don't know if that's actually useful for screen reader users, but I invented that because I thought it might be. Do you guys think it is or not really for Timothy or Pranav?
Extremely useful, I think.
Okay, cool.
I think so. I don't know. I regularly use the CLI for Git. So.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't have to now. So I'm hoping that this will get increasingly more usable, but you get the idea.
All right.
In any case, visually as well, this marker also tells me that I've made a change. In this particular case, what I did is I took the answer key and then I deleted the answer because then I can rewrite the answer, right? But so that's why it's showing as a red marker on the screen. If I add lines of code, they show up as green. And those are also status effects as well. So you can go through Control-Shift-I, et cetera. Okay. Now, the next thing is when I've got sounds that I want to trigger them, if you've got your sounds now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to play sounds on a collision. Now, in this particular program, I've already done collisions with my little potions, but I don't know if everybody else has. Have you all done like I think you did your quest yesterday, right? Where you collided with things and then you would, that sort of thing?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
I'm going to briefly hop back to the learner group just because Amanda needs to restart her computer, so I'll be back.
No problem.
Yeah, I mean, as far as, the big thing we did was, being able to like pick up items using collision or something. And then I think we just had a screen notification when we'd actually run into something.
Gotcha.
We commented that out or something, but.
And so we're going to change that to play a sound as this goes. And so the first thing I'm going to do is this particular version of my program has a music file in it already. And we actually just use another audio object to play our potion sound. So I'm going to say it's somewhere in a field. So I'm on line 36, right below my, my music call. And I'm going to say audio. And then I'm going to call it potion sound. Potion sound. So audio space potion sound. And potion sound is going to be the sound that I got from my system, and it's also the one I put in Zoom. And I'm going to load it inside of Create Game just like I do the other thing. But in this particular case, I'm going to say potion sound : and instead of calling load to stream, I'm going to load the entire sound file in all at once because I'm not streaming it. I just want to play it and then move on. I can play it 100 times. It doesn't matter because it's so short. So I've got 3 choices. Load audio samples. So if you wanted to make yourself a sine wave and then load it, you can do that. If you wanted to load it from a file, you can do that with an absolute path like Pranav was talking about. Or there's also the text file path that we could do there as well. And so I'm going to do that. And I'm going to put mine in resources, sounds, and then I don't remember what I call it mine, potion.og. I'll have to look that up. So resources, sounds, then potion.og. Oh, but interestingly, I actually spelled mine wrong, and it should give me an error. So I'm going to run it just so people can see what that error is, and I'll audio describe it. Okay. Okay, fine. That actually worked just fine. So maybe that's not it. I'm going to spell it totally wrong then. Let's do that. Perfect. If you get a sound that is, oh, right, because I'm on Windows. I'm used to being on Mac. If you're on Windows, it doesn't care as much about file paths. If you get an error that says something like java.lang.runtime exception could not load sound file with path, that means you spelled it wrong, probably. Okay, now just like before, if I call load, that will not play anything. And I don't want to just call play right away, otherwise it will do that. But I'm going to do that just so you can see what it does. So if I say potion sound.play, it'll play it right away, but that's probably not the behavior that we want. So it did do it. And by the way, I'm going to turn off that music just for a while so you can not go crazy. Oh, wait, actually, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to change the volume. So to change the volume of my music, I'm going to go up to my music thing, and I'm going to say music set volume. And because I know that it goes between 0 and 1, I'm going to say 0.1, just so that it's pretty quiet, and then rerun it. So it's a lot quieter. Okay. So now, just to recap, I've got a new audio object. I called it potion sound. You can call it what you wish. It's just a variable name. It doesn't matter what it is. And then I've got a potion sound : load, and I load in the one that I did, and you can load in whatever you want. Inside of update, I don't have anything, and I don't have to do anything because I'm not streaming it. I'm just going to play it. So now anytime that I want this to fire, I just call play. So that's all. So at this point, I need to know exactly where I'm at in this particular game. And so in mine, I think where I'm at is I can go up to my little guy, and then I don't have any sounds in this particular version because I had that later in mine, and it causes my potions to appear. And when I run into my potions, I want it to actually play a sound. So in mine, and I think in yours too, you've already hooked up your ability to like collect these items like we talked about earlier. So all you have to do is find in your game where you do the collisions, and then just add potion sound : play. So I'm going to do that for all of mine. And by the way, if you're looking at the code, you don't want to copy it, because my code for this particular tutorial was designed to slightly differently than the way William did it. It was designed in this case to show you how to do something kind of ugly, and then it kind of condenses it over the next tutorials. But if your code is different, that's okay. So I'm adding potion sound : play, and I'm doing it at anywhere where I've got a collision event. And then in my case, I'm also calling remove on all of them so that the potions disappear. And so you get an oral indication and a visual indication whenever the potions disappear. And this is one of the key things with accessibility with games, is that as you start to program, what you find is that a lot of what you would really might want anyway to indicate something to the player, having a sound or something, can both be accessible and it can be sort of just part of the ambiance of the game in general. Okay, so then I'm going to run my game. I've added potion sound : play to everywhere where there's a collision event. And then I'm going to play. So I go up, I talk to my little dude, he tells me that Evil Lord Bunnykins is coming or whatever. And in my case, I'm moving it. Oops. I'm zooming, being a little finicky. And when I hit the potions, making a sound. Now that doesn't help you find it. We've talked about this a little bit. We've talked about this. Oh, hold on. Amanda needs permission. Oh, she needs record permission again. Okay. Unfortunately, I have to jump to the, I can't add record permissions for Amanda while I'm in this particular thing. So I will be right back. Just give me 1 second. Go ahead and finish your parts and then we'll catch up.
Delivery of what?
Okay, so. Hi, Andy.
Hi. You're able to record.
Steffy's back. Okay. Nick's on the timeshares.
Oh, you're selling timeshares now, William? I mean, you know, if you're going to choose a time to sell timeshares, maybe in the middle of a pandemic, maybe isn't the best time.
Think of the savings you could get by coming into the market right now.
That's true. I bet a lot of those companies are going to go bankrupt, but you know.
We can only hope.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. So does everybody kind of have the idea of the ability to use those sounds? It's relatively straightforward. Like of the tutorials, it's probably one of the easier ones to do. So yeah.
Yeah, although one of the things that I really want to do, that I think I've mentioned to both you guys, is add footsteps. I want to know that I'm moving through space. How do I do that?
So there's a couple ways that you can do that. If you have a footstep sound, you can use a looping command. And then that can be, as you're moving, you can set it to loop. And then when you stop moving, you cannot. That's probably one way that I might do it. Did you have a different way, William? You look like you want to say something.
Yeah, so I'm also just working on trying to test all these conditions. It's actually really hard to get all these permutations.
I know it is.
The thing that I do for the game that I'm working on right now is in my update loop, I check to see for the player character, because we're using that linear velocity to move around, if my player's linear velocity in either the X or the Y is not equal to 0, I check to see if my footstep sound is playing. And if it's not, I start playing it. And otherwise, if it is playing and the velocity is 0, I tell it to stop. The one other thing you need to do in that case is you just want to get your footstep sound and tell it to loop. So that basically you just say, once I start moving, just play the sound once and just allow it to keep looping until the point I notice where I've stopped moving. You can also attach this directly to the movement commands in our press key and release key stuff, as opposed to the linear velocity stuff. In my particular case, I need it just because I have like other things that can make you move. But yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a couple options there. You do have to kind of code it, is the point.
Right.
But you know, that's okay. That's kind of the point. So
yeah. But does that make sense that just like if you have to press key stuff, just start playing the sound and let it loop when you press one of the movement keys, and when you release one of the movement keys, make it stop?
I guess why would you need it to loop? I guess if
the way that I'm telling you that I would do it, there's no looping involved.
Okay. Because I mean, if you're just gonna hold down the arrow key, I mean, or if you just press the arrow key once, you just tap it. I mean, you only want one footstep.
Sorry,
right?
there's no loops in terms of programming, but you tell the audio to loop just because my assumption is that you have some audio that is just like consistent footsteps. You just have like pitter patter, pitter patter, pitter patter, and you want to just let that sound continue to play as long as you are still in motion, right?
Now, the only other thing you have to be aware of is that if you're making footstep sounds, the only way that Quorum allows you to do it is to get 2 coconuts and bang them together slowly over time. That's required. But if you do that, at some point in your game, you have to put French people on top of a castle, and they have to yell obscenities down to the people below. It's in the documentation somewhere. I'm not sure.
I saw it.
I can do that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't take it very seriously.
Would you kind of run me through this? So you know, in my code, that when my main character player collide with someone, the program is going to return the name of that object, item 2, and then if I wanted to, if this player is colliding something to something, if you wanted to pick up that object, you hit enter and then make the sound and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
You know, my thinking is that you need to create in the keyboard listener or keyboard event, but that's, you know, in some way need to incorporate with the collision system.
Mhm.
Does
Yeah,
that make
so
sense?
you can do it either way. So like if you're going to do it through a keyboard listener, what I would do is I would check the distance of the item and then say,
Ah.
is it close enough? If you're going to do
got
it through a collision listener, then you don't really have to do anything special. You just say, if I ran into the damn thing, then I'm good to go. But you can do it either way. And
yeah.
actually, ironically, in my code, and I'll share my screen really quick, I actually do it both ways.
Mm.
So in mine specifically, when I want to trigger my quest, I have a space command. I have no idea how you guys did this, but this is how I did it when I was doing this. I have a space command and I have a player and I have an NPC and I get their X and Y position. And then I use the a distance formula. And I think you folks used like 2 vectors or something like that. That's
Yeah, we
probably
grab the vector
smarter.
2 and just let it do distance for us.
Yeah, that's probably smarter, but like I didn't remember how to do that. And I did remember the math. So I just did the math. But whatever, you can just grab 2 vectors, set them, and call the distance formula. It just does exactly what I did there. And then if the distance is below some threshold, I trigger it. And that's exactly like what you're saying, Ko.
I got you. Yep.
But you don't have to do it that way either. The nice thing about games and programming is you can kind of have it do whatever you please. And so if you want it to be like that, you can totally do it. If you want it to be collisions, you can totally do that. It just kind of depends on what kind of game you're making and what you want it to do. So
Makes sense.
yeah.
Okay, I have a question. Isn't there a action? Well, I don't know if you want to call it action. Isn't there something for constructor? I know that you don't support specifically constructors, but isn't there like something like on create?
So we actually do have constructors, and it's funny. So I'll tell you very briefly. Since I know you do a bunch of programming.
Yeah.
In programming, there's very often there's this concept for everybody. It's called a constructor, and what it basically means is when this object is first created, do something specific and store it in memory or do whatever you're going to do, load in some way.
Yeah.
But it's really common in programming, many programming languages, to allow constructors with parameters. And in Quorum, we made the decision to turn that off. And the reasons make everybody on the Quorum team livid, because none of us buy the research that's been done on this. There's really only like 1 study that we know of. It's possible there's another one that we haven't seen, but by this guy named Jeff Stylos, pretty good researcher, but he did this study on constructors with parameters and claimed some evidence that they cause problems for human programmers. And so we tend to follow whatever the evidence in the literature is, and that's the only evidence we really know of. However, there are serious methodological flaws with this study that make all of us extremely skeptical that the result is actually correct. But the issue is minor enough that none of us really want to bother running our own study, so we just kind of follow it until better evidence comes out over time. Yeah, so isn't that lovely, right? So this is one of the downsides of making an evidence-based programming language, is that if the evidence ends up being kind of wishy-washy, what decision do you make? And that's not clear. But in any case, onCreate is a constructor. That is exactly what it is.
Okay.
Yeah. And to make matters worse, the evidence that we have on the words onCreate, it's actually not good. But we have run studies to try to change the word choice, and the studies were inconclusive. So, woohoo! Yeah, so again, this is like one of the tricky things about trying to design programming language based on data, is that studies don't always work out. And so sometimes when you run them, you get inconclusive results. And constructors, I would say in the academic literature, are inconclusive. So, but
So you mean,
interesting.
If I have a class and I say on create, that's a constructor.
Yep, sure is. You can't have parameters in it. Quorum doesn't allow it, but you can have a constructor. Yeah.
I mean, I almost kind of get it. Like, since, I don't know, if you're, well, I don't know. It's the same thing as an action, I guess. I don't know. I was going to say something about, like, you know, the problem with, like, magic numbers or something, where it's like, you know, at least if you're going to say set X or something, set Y, like, is more explicit about what's happening. But
It is an action. In fact, in Quorum, it literally just name mangles the name and then calls it. So like that's all it does. But the unfortunate thing about that stylus paper, he says in that paper stuff like, we would provide statistics for our results here, but we don't believe the developer community would believe them. And I'm just like, holy crap, you gotta be kidding me. Stuff like that. So serious methodological flaws in the paper, but it is what it is, you know? So
Yeah.
we're still follow it because we don't have anything better. I mean, I wish we did, so. In
How's
any case.
how's uncreate spelled? Is it capital O?
No, it's lowercase on and then space, which is weird, and then create. Like I said, I hope this changes at some point. But
Is it lowercase c create?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just to make matters more confusing, right?
An action name has spaces?
That I know it's dumb. It makes no sense. Like everybody on the team hates it, but we need more data before we can make a decision as to what to do with it. So, yeah, especially for anything. Oh, go ahead.
What's a statistically significant sample for you?
Oh boy, this is a question that's far beyond what we can talk about in 5 seconds. So if you want to know what I consider to be rigorous empirically, I have a class with a bunch of notes that I teach on it, and I'm happy to share those notes with you. So,
fortunately, the answer is not the size of this room, so we can't all just yell what we want and then we get into it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It involves, basically, I base a lot of the studies that we do on medical models. And so we use study techniques that have been around for quite a while that involve a considerable number of checks and balances to prevent fraud, to prevent errors, to prevent mistakes and stuff like that. And then once we do that, and then we do repetition of the experiments to make sure we get the same answer over and over again. And if that all works out, it goes into the language. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That's the idea. And when you think about it, that makes sense. Like, what we don't want to do is we don't want to change the syntax of Quorum every year because it'll drive teachers crazy. And so if we do make a change, we want there to be reasonable evidence that the change was actually needed and that it was actually help people. So that's the idea. Okay, well, that was more than I was planning on talking about that. But so that's really it for triggering sounds. There's really not much more to it than that for the really basic stuff. You can change volume, you can change pitch, you can do all that kind of stuff. But nonetheless, to just have a song and play it, that's really about it. So what that means then is the next thing that we can do is, I don't know, did you folks already go over arrays or not?
So a couple things. We didn't go through arrays, although we did talk about iterators while we were doing stuff. We do have a 15-minute break on the schedule right now before we continue.
We do? Oh, yep. Okay. Well, then why don't we do that then? Why don't we go ahead and take 15 minutes, and then we'll come back, and then we'll start doing a reminder on arrays, and then we will move on to spatial sounds, the spatial sounds one, which is one of the harder ones. So this one will be interesting. Okay, so 15-minute break, commence. Imagine not everybody's back yet, so I'll give people a few more minutes, but I'll
I do have a question. I don't know if it's not relevant to what we're about to get into.
Do it.
But I'm trying to figure out how I would code a collision event between an object that my player character has pushed and another object with physics enabled on my palette or on my scene.
Okay, you want to show your code?
Sure. This is me just doing some poor experimentation with what I'm working on. But,
oh, you're good, dude. That's the whole point.
Yep. All right. It's sharing the wrong screen. There we go. Okay. So I'm trying to figure out how I would go about causing some sort of collision event between, say, a water tile containing water. I tried collides contains water. That didn't work. It's throwing up errors in the first place. But the goal is to get one of the logs that's in my scene, if I were to push it, say, into a water tile or a stone to water tile where there's physics enabled, to cause both the log and the stone to water tiles physics to be disabled so that my character could, quote unquote, cross it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the process is the same. So you would, when you're pushing it, you would check to see if the log and the water tile are both there. So I need to see your code. Where's the thing where it crashed with water?
So I haven't figured that part out yet, but this is what I was writing for that, what I've got highlighted.
You're on a web browser.
Oh, whoops, I got the wrong, it's not displaying which screen I am trying to share.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. I see a web browser.
There we go. You see it now?
Ah, look at that.
Okay, there we go. Okay. So I'm trying to get this code. Oh, I guess what I was showing didn't show it. Okay.
Wait.
This obviously is not correct. Obviously.
No.
So,
Yeah, so you need to do it's still the collision listener stuff. Where is that?
right. I'm in the collision event area for that. Is that
The
where?
original code that we had written together, Adam, assumed that the collision event was going to be using the player as one of them. So that if statement and else if that we have at the top is basically just figuring out which of those two things is the player. And if neither of them is the player, we just said, we're not going to worry about it for right now. We only care about player collision stuff. So we have that return now and whatnot. So what we really need to do in this case is we need to write some different code that is going to check to see, not to check to see if the player is involved, but rather if these two things you're interested in are involved, right? If the log and the water are
so then it would just basically be doing this again for the log and the water tile.
Yeah, you can kind of imagine that in that else where it's a return now right now, instead of doing that, we could instead have some different if statements to check to see, well, okay, neither of these involve the player. Maybe it involves the log and the water that we care about and put it in there.
Okay. And so then I could do a nested if statement in here. Okay.
Stuff like that would be just fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, of course, you can imagine if you were making an entire massively multiplayer game, you're not going to handle all collisions in this one place because that would get that tricky. So you would abstract this out, but like this type of thing is pretty normal for small games, especially. So.
Okay.
By the way, Andy, I have spent some time, and I have a program that creates Quorum code to produce and output all of the combinations of true, false, and an or up to 5 deep. The only problem is it doesn't put any parentheses in there, which I think is the #1 thing we need to test, right?
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what I need to do to plug that in here, but I've already spent about 2 hours on this, just like getting this all slapped together and also bouncing back and forth between other things. I do still need to work on my presentation tomorrow. So, yeah.
So maybe put your code somewhere that I can get it and I can.
Yeah, you want me to just like zip it up, send it to you on Slack or something?
Something like that is fine. Okay. Yeah. Like I think I solved it last night, whatever this weird ass thing was that we somehow never seen, but like I want to make sure.
Yeah, part of what I'm concerned about is I have 512 results here, and I don't know how I'd actually check to see if these are all correct, because the thing I would like to use to check to see if they're correct is
the normal thing. Yeah.
Use the compiler to check it for me, but that's the thing we're testing. So
yeah,
I don't want to do all 512 of these by hand, and there's going to be a lot more once you start injecting parentheses all over the place. So
yeah, that makes sense.
How exactly we want to test this?
I have a Git query.
Do it.
In Quorum Studio, so I have my product open right now. I want to send that to Git.
Yep.
Do I have to create the repository on the Git site beforehand, then pull it down and then push this thing up, or?
Yep, it doesn't let you create your own repositories. So now that's
okay.
not necessarily. I don't actually think anybody's asked for it, but you have to make it on the GitHub site first, and then go from and pull it down and then do whatever. So usually the way I do it is I go to GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever. And then I make the thing, and then I do a clone, and then I pull that down and call it a day.
You do a clone or a pull request, or you do a clone then a pull?
I do a clone, yeah. So I make it on GitHub or Bitbucket, and then I do a clone from within Quorum Studio, and it will pull it down, and then that's it. Then you're done. You can do whatever you want. You don't need to pull additionally from there because you've cloned the latest version.
Okay. So you clone an empty repository.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that's right. And then you just add whatever you want to it, like put in a project or whatever you feel like, whatever you're making. So.
Is there any mathematical way to check playability of a game, I got myself stuck in my own game such that I couldn't reach my non-playing character, which is kind of interesting.
I don't know.
In terms of like
Probably
checking the like mathematical playability of the game, there are certain kinds of games where they can tell to see if you've gotten stuck under very specific circumstances, but it requires that you know exactly what's going on with your movement system and that your movement system is able to support it, right?
Yeah.
If you have something like, you know, a lot of common like sort of like tactical top-down games, or if you had something where it's like Fire Emblem or Advance Wars or you know, the original Pokemon games where they were all very well constrained on the grid, and the movement is not like you are discretely moving between these pixels, but rather you are on grid space, you know, X, Y of certain value. You could like do some relatively simple, in the grand scheme of things, relatively simple pathfinding using like Dextras or A-Star or something, and you could come to the conclusion there is no path, right? But that's not true for all possible movement systems and all possible games, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah, like I could imagine you did A-Star on the physics tiles and something like that, but like more than likely a lot of games, I bet you that for AAA games and stuff, they also just employ a whole bunch of testers too, because you know there's lots of things to test other than just movement. So even if you spent a considerable amount of dev time to try to get it exactly right, sometimes just having people play it is maybe even easier to find problems depending on what you're doing. So I don't know. It's not a perfect answer, but
yeah, good enough kind of makes things easier and a little more harder, but that's okay.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to jump to playing around a little bit with arrays and also playing around a little bit with repeat statements. And so one of the things I did with the beginner track, and I want to do it here too, just to make sure that everybody is on the same page, is I want to pull off some materials from the website first, just so that everybody can see exactly what outside of their game, what we're working on. And so first I'm going to dump in an arrays. Shoot, I'm on Windows. Arrays tutorial into the Zoom chat, and I'll put it into Slack as well. And I'll put it in advanced. And so just to make sure, now I know that this is the advanced group, so many of you already know what arrays and such are, but nonetheless, I think it's used because arrays are one of those things that they're usually taught either sort of at the end of a first programming class, or like they're used more heavily in like a second programming class at the college level. They can be slightly tricky, so I feel like just a quick reminder probably won't hurt, but if I'm being too duplicative of your knowledge, that's okay, let me know and I'll bugger off. But so on my screen, and I will share it in just a moment, what I've got is I've got the website for arrays, the tutorial, and inside of it I've got a couple things, and that is this line of code that I've got use libraries.containers.array. That's its location, that's where it lives. And then I've got this command that says array, and then it's a less than symbol, the word integer, a right then symbol, and then the word array. So let's break this down, and let's have someone, if possible, remind me what this means. And then let's kind of go over in what this is doing in the computer, and let's practice a little bit messing around with these arrays. So what does that mean? Array, less than, integer, right than, greater than, and then array. What does that mean?
It basically sets up pieces of memory for integer type values, like little mailboxes, where you can put values and hang on to them to use later.
That is exactly right. There's like someone really banging on the door. Hold on just 1 second. Hey, Melissa, is someone waiting for us? Here, I apologize. I will be back. Just 1 second. Someone's locked out of the house.
Joys of Zoom, right?
We have confirmed that Stefik is in fact wearing pants.
Yeah, we'll see if that lasts by the time we reach. What is the name of the social hour this time? Are we onto the loop of drinking? For I greater than Dink.
I greater than Dink. My daughter had locked herself out. Sorry. Okay. So, yeah, so Sarah had that exactly right. So the word array here is the type. Then this funny less than, integer, greater than thing. This has a special name in computer science. Does anyone know what it is? It is called
A variable type.
You would think so, but it has a weirder name, just to confuse everyone as much as possible. It is called a generic or a template. A generic or template. And the idea is the array could technically, you could put anything into it, but this integer thing is saying, hey, I want an array that only takes integers. That's all I want it to accept, even though technically it could take anything. And then there's the name, which is array. Now, in addition, once you have an array, you can add. Oh, sorry. Did you say something, Adam?
No, your internet was cutting out. We couldn't hear what you were saying.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, it says my internet connection is unstable again. Sure. So then we've got this array here, and you can call add on it, and there's a corresponding remove as well. And this allows me to add items of that particular type. Now, 5 is an integer, and as such, you can add it to a particular array. So here's what I'd like everybody to do. I would like everybody to make an array of a particular type, and you can try multiple types inside of one of these quorum boxes, outside of your game, just for the sake of argument. And then I'd like you to add a couple items to it, and then that's it. And then we will get to printing them out. So everybody give that a shot. And I'll type stuff on the screen too, and then I'll describe it when I'm doing, but I'll stop sharing for now. So it's even playing field. And obviously you can use the code on here.
You said to just do it anywhere in the file? No, just at the end of the file, you said?
No. I was saying just use the website, so it's outside of your game.
Oh, gotcha.
But you know, if you want to put it in a file, in your file, that's fine too. But we're going to throw it all away. So I just sometimes when I use the website to teach stuff, I kind of use these little quorum boxes as a place that we can put some scratch code and then toss it, right? Because we're not gonna keep this code. We just want to write it as an example. Okay, I'm gonna pull my screen up and I'm gonna go over a couple lines. So on my screen, I've got one line that says use libraries.containers.array. I then make a Boolean array, which is array less than, Boolean greater than, bools colon add true, and then bools colon add false. Ta-da. Now suppose for the sake of argument that I wanted to print all of these out. How would I do that?
Output?
Well, I can't just use an output statement because there's multiple items in the array. So how do I manage that?
Iterator.
I could use an iterator. That's one way.
Or
You could use a loop.
Yeah.
We have to use a loop. Yeah.
Repeat
So
loop.
there's lots of ways to skin this cat. And one of them is, I'll show you one of them. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to say integer. And I'm going to say item equals 0. And then I'm going to make a loop where I say repeat array colon get size times. So repeat array colon get size with capital G, capital S, left and right paren, and then times. And then I'm going to put an end there, and I'm going to have item equals item plus 1. I'm going to basically increase the number of items that I have on the, the location of the item that I care about. Now what I want to do then is I want to get from the array the item, excuse me, at this particular location, and it's a Boolean. So I'm going to say Boolean B inside of the repeat loop equals, and then array colon get item. So now to give my code, I have integer item equals 0, repeat array colon get size capitals, left and right paren, times, Boolean B equals array colon get, and then left and right paren with item in it. Item equals item plus 1, and then end. And then the final thing that I would do is I would output B. And what this should do is, because I've got two Booleans in my loop, two Booleans in my array, it should output true and then false, because those are the two values I gave it. And if I run my program, I get a compiler error because of course I do. I must have spelled something wrong. Oh, ha ha ha. I'm sorry, I named my array bools. So you can name your array whatever you see fit.
You did get size star?
Yeah, I called get size, capital G, capital S. And so bools colon get size, or array colon get size, whatever you named your array.
Ah, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so then I just said output B for my Boolean, and I do get the correct answer, which is 2 Booleans. So here's the idea. I have an array, I filled it up, and then I iterated or looped over it, and then I output each value. Any questions on this particular code snippet? Because we're going to do this in our game.
So if I were doing this with an integer or an integer array, let's say it was size 10, so I'd say array add 10.
Mm-hmm.
And I had it repeat the array get size times. The only thing that it output after basically doing the same code, except instead of using a Boolean, it was an integer.
Mm-hmm.
It just displayed the number 10 at the end.
I'd have to see your code.
Okay.
You can share it if you'd like. Stop sharing on mine.
All right. Is it displaying it?
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So Adam has got use libraries.containers.array, array integer array. That looks good. And then he says array colon add 10, integer item equals 0, repeat array colon get size times, get the one item, output it in there, and all he gets is 10. That is correct.
So, all right. So I shouldn't be getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
No, because you only put one item in the array. There's only one item in it, and that is the item 10.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah. So arrays don't count for you. They don't do anything like that. They store things. So it's like it's like a storage bin. You have a storage bin, and inside of it, it has technically an infinite sort of amount of memory. And you say, I take the number 10 and I put it in the storage bin, and then that's all that's in there.
All right. So if I were to do a number of different add functions in there, then it would be able to produce that result.
Bingo. That's exactly right.
All right. Thanks.
Yep. Okay. Other questions? Did you kind of get the idea?
Got it.
Okay, great. All right. So
not on arrays per se, sorry, not on arrays per se, but I've never understood this. If I keep filling an array, I am eventually going to get an out of memory error.
Yep.
But my computer has something called virtual memory.
Mhm.
So why doesn't it automatically go to virtual memory? I'm filling
Right.
an array.
Okay, so that's a good question, and I can answer that. So here's the thing: in the computer, and just for everybody, there's two kinds of memory. Well, actually, there's a whole bunch of kinds of memory, but there's two that are commonly mentioned. One of it is just called physical RAM, and another is called virtual memory. So first of all, what is virtual memory? Does anyone know what virtual memory is?
It's
Virtual
writing
memory. Go ahead.
it's writing the contents of the RAM to disk.
Yeah, that's right. And so, is that slow or fast?
Slow.
Slow. So it's basically taking a hard drive and saying, well, I'm out of RAM, so let's just toss it on disk. It is massively, ridiculously slow, although much better today with the advent of solid state disk drives, which are dramatically faster compared to the old spinning drives, all else being equal. So, but here's the thing. When the computer starts running out of memory, it can, in fact, write to virtual RAM, but there's a catch. And the catch is that different programming languages manage this in different ways. One of the most common ones is to connect to something called the heap. And certain programming languages often place limitations on the size of that heap. It's basically like a big storage bin for where it puts all your objects. And they put limitations on that storage bin regardless of whether it's in virtual memory or whether it's in physical memory. So if that storage bin gets above a few gigabytes, it kicks you out, even though technically your machine might have more memory than that. It might even have more physical memory, let alone virtual memory.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's a really common limitation. And sometimes there's all sorts of reasons why different programming languages manage this in different ways, but that is a common thing. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So for example, Java used to say when you boot up, it'd say, how big do you want your heap to be? And then like you'd give it a limit. It'd say, okay, if you go above that, I'm going to kick you out. That sort of idea. I think it's a little smarter than that nowadays, but I forget exactly the detail. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so so there are limits to size, there are all sorts of stuff. It's pretty hard to hit those limits on a practical level unless you're doing funny stuff, but none or hardcore stuff. But let's kind of go back to Quorum Studio here, and what we're going to do for this particular tutorial, we've talked a little bit about repeat. What we want to do here is we're going to write an algorithm that's going to calculate the closest item to the player. And there's a reason we're going to do this. And that is, generally speaking, what we want is we want to, one of the things we talk about, well, at least while we're at EPIQ, is we want games to be accessible. And sometimes the only way that we can make games accessible is to use a little bit of math to derive some information about our computer program, what it's doing. And then once we have that math, some kind of like numerical way to understand it, then we can output that information to a user in any number of ways, like a beeping sound, speech, something else. But the point is, sometimes you need to kind of play with the math a little bit. And then once you have it, then you can go in and figure out how to make that information accessible, right? And so one of the things I want to do, I want to have this function that's going to calculate which of the items is actually closest to the player, right? That's the idea. What we do with that accessibly will be up to you. But to do that, I also want to make my my potions be in an array. Now, it might be possible that your potions or whatever you're doing already are. So are they, or should I go in and show you how to do this conversion?
I mean, I have mushrooms and they are already in a layer 2D array.
They're in the layer 2D, but I want just those items in an array. Have you guys already done that?
No, we haven't.
Actually,
No.
I put my treasure chest actually in a hash table so I could look them up when I found them.
Perfect. That would work just fine as well. You'll have to change our code a little bit, but nonetheless, it's the same principle. So you'll need to use an iterator instead of a loop, but that's fine. Okay. All right. Well, then let's go ahead and do it. So in my code, I have 5 calls to find item 2D by name. And mine are blue potion 1 through blue potion 5. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an array and I'm going to start to replace this code. So notably, at the top of my file, the first thing I'm going to do is, in my case, I'm going to delete these potion 1 through potion 5s. And I'm going to do that because, well, actually, I guess I won't do that yet. I'm going to add an array first. So first I'm going to go array, and then I'm going to go item 2D, because the array doesn't care what kind of item is in it. It just cares, is it an integer? What is it exactly? And then I'm going to say potions. And I get an editor hint because I haven't used an array in this class yet. And so I'm going to alt enter that thing. And I'm going to, ta-da, now I have an array that I can use. So that's step 1. And keep track of what the name of this array is. The second thing that I need to do is, instead of calling find item by name and putting them in individual potions, I'm going to go ahead and add them to my array, which is going to break stuff, but that's okay. So I'm going to say potions :add, and then inside of that potions :add, I'm going to do my find item by name. So this line of code, wherever I'm doing that find item by name, or whatever you have as your equivalent, I'm going to have potions :add, left paren, find item 2D by name, left paren, blue potion 1, and double quotes, right paren. And I'm going to do that for all 5 of my potions. And so I'm just going to do that manually. This is what I want you to do too, if you have them in a manual.
If we want to find potions in general, not necessarily a blue potion, can we still use the contains within that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's totally fine. I'm just saying, if you have a set number of variables with your items in them, I want you to convert this to an array. Maybe you've already done that because you've done this contains stuff. And if you have, that's great too.
Yeah, for the stuff that we did yesterday, we weren't putting anything into more convenient containers, but we were showing how we could use the iterator to look through all of the items on the layer and find certain things using stuff like contains.
Gotcha. Okay. And that's fine too. Okay. So now in my code, at least, I went in and I had manually called set collidable on all of my potions. And instead of doing that, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to actually make a loop. And then inside of my loop, I'm going to call set collidable on all of the items in my potions array now, because now I can do this one thing at a time. And I'm going to show you a trick that I added inside of Quorum Studio 2 that I hope works exactly how I intend. And inside of in the code completion, there's actually some items that are set up now. There's Boolean, if, integer, number, repeat, and repeat while condition, and then text. I'm actually going to go ahead and go down to repeat while condition in code completion. I'm going to press enter. And you'll notice it actually fills out an entire loop structure for you. And so the code that it generated was integer I equals 0, repeat while I less than 10, I equals I plus 1, and end. Now this particular structure, it's not super smart. So you probably have to change, like, it doesn't know that you're trying to do it over an array. It doesn't know that, you know, that I is a valid variable in this context. All it does is just generate some structure, and then you can change it according to your needs. But I'm going to then do that. So I'm going to say, instead of 10, I'm going to say potions : get size. Oops. And inside of my array, I'm going to say potions : get, and I'm going to pass it I. And then I'm going to press, oh, you may not know this one. So if I have potions : get in an array, I can't say about you, but I never bloody remember what return type these things are, because it's templated and it's complicated. So if you'll notice that you can actually press Alt Enter on this too, or you can right click and it says assign return value to new variable. And because Quorum already knows the template of this type, if I select this thing, blammo, it says now item 2D, and then it gives it a name. So you don't even have to remember what your type was because Quorum will figure that out for you. So believe it or not, in this code to iterate over this stuff, Quorum actually auto-generated 90% of it for you. And this is one of the advantages of doing it in a real editor as opposed to the online website where you have to memorize the whole thing. Okay, before I go on, does everybody understand what I did there? I'm not hearing any objections. So I assume Ko Inamura has an objection, but we will.
Trying to work on the
Oh,
correct syntax to use the contains within that. So inside, if I can, so I can still do find item by item 2D by name.
Mm-hmm.
Inside of the parentheses, what would I need?
If you do find item 2D by name, then it's going to look for an exact name.
Okay, so I need to change that.
Yeah, so you could also just do this. I had a function that I posted in somewhere earlier. I think it was in like a, I don't know, general or support or something that would allow you to do a contains thing, and you could use that. And then it returned to you an array of those items too. And that's fine too if you want to use something like that. So then you would get all the items as an iterator, and then iterator would check their name, call contains, see if they match. And you can do that. There's all sorts of ways that you can solve these problems. And none of them are really right or wrong. So it just depends on what you're trying to do.
What's the, this value, item to the value? It's gonna hold everything inside of the array into this value.
Do you mean on line?
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, that's well. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I say potions : get, and then I pass it a variable I, that's saying find the item at position I, and I on the first iteration of the loop is 0, so it's the first one. So that'll be blue potion 1. On the second iteration of the loop, it'll be blue potion 2, and etc.
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to rename this variable to be, oops, not position, but potion. And then I'm actually going to be able to simplify some of my code a little bit later when I do this. In fact, why don't I go ahead and do that now? So inside of my loop, I have 5 commands that are potion 1 : set collidable, potion 2 : set collidable, and potion 1 : hide. I'm going to get rid of all that. And I'm going to copy paste and say potion set collidable and potion : hide. And you'll notice that now I have a lot less code, and I can set multiple properties on many items in my editor all at once. So one of the advantages of doing stuff like this is I can load a scene. If there's some property that Quorum doesn't expose in the visual editor, or you want to automate it, you can actually just write a little loop, and then you can traverse over the whole scene, change whatever properties you want in it, and then even on the fly, dynamically, as you're running, as the game progresses, whatever, and you can change stuff as a game progresses.
Got it.
So reading this whole line of code again, I've got integer I equals 0, repeat while I less than potions : get size, item 2D potion equals potions : get I, potion : set collidable true, potion : hide, and then I equals I plus 1, and end. And there's a loop, and it covers all of my potion magic.
So is setting physics, is enabling physics the same as set collidable? Probably not.
No. Set collidable just allows collisions to occur. I actually think that in my particular game, I didn't enable physics. I just enabled that they could collide. Because you can turn off collisions, and that tells Quorum, hey, these things will never collide with anything, so just ignore them. And it says, okay, no problem, right? And so in my case, I just told the potions, hey, you don't have physics, I'm not going to move you, but I will allow you to collide with things, and as such. The reason that matters is because when you really think about it, how do you calculate whether two things are colliding? We have to see if they overlap. But what if you have 100 million items on the screen? Well, that you have to check all of them with all the others to see if they're overlapping. And so there are more efficient ways to do it. We use the more efficient approach, but the idea is that it's still a little bit expensive. So the less items that can be colliding, the better.
Okay.
That's another reason why, even on physics, you have to set properties like responsive or not responsive, because ideally, we would just tell the computer, hey, calculate everything for real with real physics. But the problem is we would melt our machines because the computations are very expensive. And so your game would run super slowly, even though it'd be very accurate on a physical level. So we sort of have compromises built into the programming language, and all languages do, so that you can try to find a balance between, does it look real enough, and is it good enough for physics, or is it not quite enough and you need to step it up a little bit to make it a little bit more realistic? That's kind of the trade-off, especially for real-time things. Movies, you can kind of, render it on a supercomputer or whatever and kind of go to town, but for real-time games, it is what it is.
So then hypothetically, if you don't use the physics engine for entire game, but you can set the player set creatable and then object, portion set creatable.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you do that, you can actually move the player in the kind of traditional move command, move X,
Yep.
50 or stuff like that.
Yep, and that'll work just fine. It'll still be Claude.
Oh,
yeah.
huh.
Now, of course, there's pros and cons. If you don't turn on physics for the player character, then if there's like a floor or something like that, you have to calculate manually if you're going to fall through it, and that is kind of tricky. But on the other hand, like the pro of it is that it's more computationally efficient, so you could do it that way too. So, I mean, this is one of the things that is always kind of frustrating about programming, is that there are often more than one way to solve the problem, and they're not necessarily right or wrong. It just depends on what you're trying to achieve. And so in this particular case for games especially, the physics stuff can be very useful for minimizing sort of the mental load on how to do these calculations, because they are kind of tricky. But on the other hand, there's a computational impact as well. And on the other hand too, like some of the physics is complicated enough that you would need like at least like a couple classes in physics to understand how the equations really work, because they are pretty hardcore. So at the end of the day, you kind of want the computer to tackle some of that for you if possible for certain kinds of things, like all the bouncing and collisions and stuff. It can be kind of painful. Okay, so all right, so we've got. Oh, you know what? I don't think I've finished refactoring. So I probably use these potions in other places too. And oh, look, I do. So in my code as well, I'm calling potion1:show at a different kind of place. This is when my quest giver exposes it. And so I need to write another loop here that does the same thing. And I'm going to do it exactly the same way. I'm going to press my loop. I'm going to press repeat while condition. And oh, that looks like a bug. Okay, I'll fix that later. It generates a loop for me, integer I = 0, repeat I less than 10. And I'm going to do the same thing, or you can copy paste your code. So get size for potions. I'm going to get potions:get. I'm going to use Alt Enter to get the item back, and I'm going to rename it potion. And then I'm going to call potion show. And then I'm going to kill my other potion objects. I did that pretty fast, but reading that code again, I went to my distance, wherever you're calculating the distance, I was calling show on all of them. And what I did is I replaced that with a loop so that now I can do show on all of them at once, no matter how many items that I have on the screen. That was integer I = 0, repeat while I less than potions::get size, item 2D potion equals potions::get, I potion::show, I = I + 1, and end.
So in your game, if the main player comes closer than 100 pixel to the mushroom, not mushroom, the potion appears.
No. In my game, and I just arbitrarily chose this, my distance trigger is actually a trigger for if you're closer to the non-player character. So let me show you on the screen, I'll explain. I have a character at the bottom of the screen, and I intentionally, because as I was coding this, I wanted it to be accessible not verbally or orally. I wanted to make it accessible in the sense that I knew exactly where to go as a first step as I added accessibility features.
I got
And
you.
so if I press up and keep pressing up, I will eventually run into this monster. And then I press space. If I'm close enough to him, it'll trigger. So if I'm not, if I'm back here, nothing happens. And if I'm closer to him, which you don't get a sound when you are closer, so that's not accessible at all. But that's because I haven't built in any features like that yet. And so I'm pressing space, and then it loads something into the console. And the potions appear.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear, my point
yeah.
isn't that that's accessible. It's not. But my point is that as you go, when you're building up games, you can add features that are both accessible and others as you go, because you have to. You have to build them up one at a time. So as you're building games, even accessible games, you have to kind of build up each feature of accessibility one at a time. So for example, in the voiceover lessons later, that will give you a very oral indication of triggering. But actually, that's not simple either, because if you're deaf, you're going to want something like closed captions. So even though, you know, you don't have, you know, accessibility for one group isn't the same as it is for the other. So this is a tricky thing, and you have to build them in one at a time. Okay, so we've moved over all of the items from manual indications to an actual array. And so now the last step here is I'm going to kill all of my potion 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at the top of my file. And I'm going to rebuild it just to make sure that everything is working still. And it sure looks like it is, or at least it compiles, so it must work. That's a joke. Okay, so I've refactored my program to be, to include that stuff. And so the last thing that I want to do is I want to write a program that is going to find the closest item to the player. And I will tell you, this is the hardest part. So before we get to this, is everyone sort of good to go? Are you all kind of with me?
I've got some errors, but that's okay. We don't need to take time to try to figure it out now.
You want me to toss you in a breakout room with somebody?
Sure.
Tim, are you around?
Yep. You want to send us to a breakout room?
Sure. Let's see. We've got Sarah in breakout room 3 and Tim Cluthy, breakout room 3. Okay. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a new key that is going to detect the distance between all of the items and ourselves. And we want to get this information mathematically first, because we can't really do anything from an accessibility perspective without some kind of like indication mathematically that we can then use to make something accessible. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to add a key inside of my key event, and I'm just going to make it whatever I want. You can make it whatever you feel like. In my case, I'm going to make it else if code equals event, and I'm just going to say F for fine. So when I press F, this is going to trigger. And before I do anything at all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an output statement there. I'm going to run my program just to make sure that it actually works. And I'm just going to press F. So I'm going to run my code. I press F, and ta-da, it does F. That's not interesting, but nonetheless, that's what I want to do first. So let me make sure everybody gets to that and that they can press F and have it go. And then we'll go on to the next part. Is everybody able to do that? Or should I give you a minute?
Yeah, give me a minute.
Okay, I'll give you all a minute. It does take a second. So 3 minutes, we'll give you 3 minutes.
So you want the letter F, so it's going to be key code.
Key code F. capital F.
I've been super lazy and using the say command rather than using the speech object, and I'm realizing it's causing all kinds of problems.
Yeah, that's true because it does block, right?
Yeah, and
And
it's blocking my music because of the screen in the background.
importantly, though, the thing that's important about that is that that provides you a clue as while being able to debug the thing as you're building in features. And so that's actually okay. Like I think
Yeah.
it's perfectly reasonable to do that because you're not going to leave that say command in. You're using it as a debugging tool. And that makes
That's true. Yeah.
So it's going to be
also,
just key code or EVT:(F)?
I put else if space code equals event:(F).
Okay, yeah.
And you can also get the key code. Oh, no. Yeah, it would be an event:(F). That would have to be that.
With or without quotation marks?
No quotation marks, because it's not an action you're calling. It's a variable constant, which is confusing, admittedly, but that is what it is.
Okay.
How bad would it be to have...
Bad. Never do it. You'll die.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding.
The speech. I have multiple speech objects. I have all my game objects like player, monster, treasure chest, all in separate classes.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, all of them are going to need speech, more or less.
Mhm.
So, I mean, would it be bad to have a speech object for each one of those? Should I set up a set speech object?
Actually, I don't think it'll make any difference. So it should be fine.
I think it should be harmless to share the speech objects.
Yeah, I think so.
Or to make a whole bunch, I should say.
Yeah.
Okay.
I recall under the hood, it like does some stuff to manage sharing in a reasonable way. I don't remember exactly what it, I mean, I wrote it, so I should remember, but like I don't remember. But I recall it does something reasonable. So
Okay.
off the top of my head, at least. So
Yeah, done.
cool. Okay. Anybody else need more time? I just want to make sure you get to the right spot because it doesn't sound like I hear anything. So, okay. Now inside my F, my key code location, I am going to, just to make this simpler, I am going to make a new action to do this. And the reason I'm going to do this is because I don't want this action to get too big. So outside of my press key, I'm going to make a new location in the file. And I'm going to say action find closest potion. And then I'm going to press a couple lines of code. I'm going to put end. And I'm not going to give it a return value or anything yet, but I'm just going to start with there. And then inside of my F spot, I'm going to call find closest potion and put a left and a right parentheses. And the reason I'm doing this is because how to calculate this is going to get a little bit hairy. And so I want to put it somewhere else that is on its own. So that function only does the one thing, that action. So again, I have else if code equals event:(F, and then inside of that is find closest potion, capital F, C, and P. This is one I'm making myself, left and right paren. And then somewhere in my file, I have to put action find closest potion, and I don't need a left or right paren there. You can put it, but it doesn't require it. And then end. And in here is where I'm going to do that thing. And then we'll eventually add a return type later. Okay. So what I'm going to do, my goal for this function is I'm actually going to start by not by trying to get it to return anything, but to try to get it to find the closest potion. And we're going to have it like speak it, that sort of thing. And later we'll add some more useful functionality on top of it. So let's think at a conceptual level how I'm going to solve this problem. If I want to find the potion that's closest to me, can someone give me like a 10,000 foot level? How would this algorithm work?
We're gonna retrieve each portion from the array and then have that item report back the X and Y coordinate. And we can set up the vector and then, you know, one of those distance thing. And then we're gonna let that each portion report back the distance to the player, and then you pick. You know, you will always pick the top one on the list.
Love it. Okay, now that's great. So I'm going to put that in my own words. We're going to use vectors, and we're going to check each potion, and we're going to check the distance, and whichever one's the smallest, that's the winner, right? So let's do that first. So first, let's get the player. Which one did I call it? Player. And I'm going to convert its X and Y coordinate into a vector. So I'm going to call player get X, put it in a value. I'm going to call player get Y, put it in a value. And then I'm going to change these variables to player X and player Y.
You're making two vectors or just one?
Just
vector?
one for the player. So I really just want to make a vector 2, and I want to put the X and the Y in there for the vector 2.
Okay.
Hey, William, you're being paged for the room. Apparently, Tim's not having any luck. Do you mind going to breakout room?
Yeah, I can go help out.
Breakout room 3. So I'm going to go vector 2. And then I'm just going to call mine player vector. And I'm going to say player vector colon, I think it's set. And then player X, player Y. I hope I have that right. I do. Great. Now, here's a thought question before we move on. You can calculate these distance formulas manually, but there's a really big advantage of using vectors. And one of them, right now, we're using 2D games. But in the next version of Quorum Studio, we're adding 3D support into the scene editor. We haven't finished that yet. We're pretty close to it, but we're not quite done. And interestingly, if you wanted to find the distance in 3D, you have to know the 3D equation as opposed to just the 2D equation. And it's more complicated. So as you get younger, like for kids, it gets harder. But if you have a 3D vector, 2 3D vectors, you can still calculate distance with the same technique, and you don't have to know how it all works. So one of the advantages of vectors is that the math is a little bit easier in order to figure it out. So just FYI. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make another vector 2. And I'm going to make it potion vector. And I'm not going to set it to anything yet. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a loop setup. And I'm going to go down to repeat while condition. I'm going to generate it. And that generates integer I equals 0, repeat while I less than 10, I equals I plus 1, and end. And instead of I is less than 10, I'm going to again go to potions colon get size. Cool. And then just like before, I'm going to say potions colon get. I'm going to pass it I. I'm going to press Alt Enter to return it. And I'm going to change the name to potion. You should see a pattern, hopefully.
How did you trigger that repeat while code generation?
It's in the code completion. You can press R. Although I just found a bug. If you press R and then you press Enter on it, it'll change the first character of integer for some reason. I'll have to fix that, but I didn't realize that was true. Or you can just press down until you get to repeat while and then press Enter and then it'll generate it correctly.
No, not happening. Anyway.
Yeah, or you can just type out the loop. That's fine too.
Yeah. I think I'll simpler.
Whatever.
Yeah, code completion didn't activate for me when I was trying it, so I'm just typing it out.
Huh, weird. I'm not sure. I just did it on screen, but you know, that's the funny thing about when you're designing tech is that if you know the magic keys, like maybe there's some other key combination that doesn't quite work, and like you've never clicked it before, so you wouldn't know. So it's possible it's something like that. In any case, I've got integer I equals 0. Repeat while I is less than potions colon get size. Item 2D potion equals potions colon get with I equals I plus 1 and end. And the idea here is that now what I need to do is I need to change this potion vector to have the current x and y coordinates so I can calculate the distance. So I'm going to call potion vector colon set. And inside of that, I'm going to call potion get x, potion get y. Oop, not position vector, potion vector. So again, that line is potion vector colon set less than potion colon get x, comma, potion colon get y, and then parens. I'm just setting the vector. I'm going to do one more step, and then I'm going to give you a minute to catch up because I imagine I'm going a little faster. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to call player vector colon, I think it's, what is it, distance? Yeah, distance. And I'm going to pass potion vector. I'm going to get back a value, and that value is the distance. Now, before I do anything, I'm also now going to output the name of the potion and its distance so that we can just see them all. So I'm going to say potion colon get name. I'm going to concatenate on something in the console, and you can use the say command for this too. And then I'm going to say distance so that I can do it. And I want to run it, and then I'm going to let you catch up. When I run my code and press F, it is now dumped into the console all 5 potions and their distances, 702, 739, 777, 684, and 656. Technically, they're not showing on screen, but that doesn't matter. Their distances are still there. Okay, before I move on, I want to give everybody a few minutes to try to figure this out. So go ahead and I'm going to leave it on screen, and I will dump the text to Zoom as well so you can see my solution. And I'll dump it to the Slack channel as well. Let me pull that up in Zoom. So that screen reader users and not can get access to the text and do what they wish. Okay, maybe another 3 or so minutes.
So we have mushroom vector, and I have a mushrooms array as well, which is where all my mushrooms are stored.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to pull data from the mushrooms array, correct? And then dump it into the mushrooms vector.
Yep.
Okay.
And I'm just reusing the same vector over and over again, but whatever floats your boat.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
So I got my loop, I got my iterator set up because I'm using a hash table. So I just need distance for that item to the player. And so all I have to do is take that, I can say number distance equals the player position, which is my vector, was it colon distance, and then the x and y of the item?
Yep.
Okay.
That sounds right. Sounds right. Okay, another 2 minutes, and then we'll go on to finding the smallest one.
How do you index the array? I'm forgetting parentheses.
Yep. So potions, get, left and right paren with a value in between. Always an
Oh.
integer.
Wait, I think I'll have to see this.
You know, is the function for this or the action just distance, or there's a distance 2D in the
It's distance.
autocomplete.
So
Okay.
player vector : distance, and then you pass a second vector.
Okay. Or can you just pass the X and Y?
I think you can do that too.
Is there a way
Let me see.
Interesting. Is there a way to get the vector from the item?
No, there isn't actually. Weirdly enough, I don't know why we don't have a helper function for that, but you'd think that would actually make sense. Let's see. Yeah, there's also a distance where you can pass an X and a Y. And there's also a distance formula that has 4 numbers in it. So I'm guessing that you could just instantiate a vector and pass all 4 of those things. And that's X1, Y1, X2, Y2.
Gosh.
So I think that you don't even have to instantiate. You could just do it from a vector class directly, and it will do that. I haven't looked at that function, but I suspect. Let me pull that function up. I'm curious myself. Yep, it looks like that's all it does is just do the distance formula. So yeah, that does look like correct too. So it's just a helper.
So
but you're right. Like you would think you could take one item 2D and pass it to another item 2D and get the distance back. You would think that would make sense, but I don't know. I guess you can't do that right now for some reason. So
if we were working in 3D space, would we still use the same distance?
Yep, you'd have to pass 3 parameters instead of 2, but the equation will be the same.
So it wouldn't actually, so it's the exact same thing in code completion.
Yep, it should be. Cool. Barring a mistake, it should be. So. Vector 3 instead of vector 2. There is also a general purpose vector class as well. That's any number of dimensions that you want, which maybe doesn't sound useful to work in 9-dimensional space, but actually it is because it's just used for different kinds of things. So.
Right.
It's used a lot in statistics, for example.
So the mushrooms vector, once again, how am I setting the array? Because I have mushrooms : get, and I have the index variable in that. And then from that, I do a getX. Is that so?
Say that again.
So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to assign the X and Y value which of my mushrooms to my mushrooms vector.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what I'm supposed to be doing?
Can you share your screen?
Yeah. Let me. Yeah.
Let's see here. So you got vector. Oh, I see. You just spelled mushroom wrong because you spelled it capital M mushroom up above and then lowercase mushroom down below.
This one?
Up above. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. That one. That one you named with the capital M at the beginning.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is okay.
And then it looks like, oh, I see. You're okay. So inside of this, you have mushroom vectors : set X, and then you're saying mushrooms get, and then LC is your.
Yeah, that's not right. I know it's not right.
It's not right because that gives you the whole mushroom, but doesn't give you the X coordinate. So you'd have to call get X past that. So over a little to the right, yeah, now colon, get X, and then the left and right paren, and that will work fine.
Okay.
Now be aware, don't forget to put in your counter below at the bottom of that loop there. Otherwise, you're going to get an infinite loop.
Oh.
And it's not you named yours LC.
Yes.
I always forget
A loop
to do that.
counter.
I know, I forgot it too. That's why I wrote that little generator, because I always forget to do it too. So, okay, cool. You look like you're good.
Yeah, just.
Are you telling me that for int I equals 0, I less than 10, I plus plus isn't very readable?
Yeah, so it turns out the literature actually hasn't answered this question. Multiple scholars have looked at it, and it looks like it increases depending on what you're measuring, comprehension, or there's some learnability type things. Usually it's about a threefold effect when you use words like repeat instead of words like for.
Not surprised.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like in our studies, we do it through a technique called token accuracy mapping, and that's a statistical procedure I won't get into, but like that's what we see in our studies. If you look at studies by David Weintraub, he finds basically the same thing, even in block languages with cited folks. So, so they see about the same effect, which is pretty interesting. So that's why I always find it funny. Sometimes we get emails that are like, dude, you should change it back to 4. And I'm like, yeah, but look at the data, right? So don't guess.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like that's always the hardest loop to teach people because there's so much going on in that one line of code.
Right, that's exactly true. So, okay, so now we're going to go back and we're going to add to our loop which one of these is the smallest of the potions, and we're gonna keep track of that. So right above where we have a potions vector, we're going to actually keep track of a potion, and we're going to store a spot in memory for us to like store whatever potion it is. And so we're going to say item 2D, we're going to make a variable, and we're going to call it closest equals undefined. And when we do this, what we're telling a programming language is we want to hold a spot in memory, but we don't want anything in it. We just want garbage memory there. We don't care what it is. It's not pointing to anything valid. It's pointing to junk, right? And that's what undefined means. But I want you to store that so that we have a spot ready in memory, ready to go. So item 2D closest equals undefined. And even though I've described that as undefined, we can actually fill it with something right away. And that would actually be potions get I. So even though I've said undefined, I'm telling you already to change it. And we're going to say item 2D closest is equal to potions colon get, and then pass it the first item. Now, technically, this is slightly unsafe because that array could be empty, but we know it's not because we've filled it up. So we want to say item 2D closest equals potion 0. Now, it could be that that item is actually, oh, you know what? This is not what I want to do. I'm sorry. I'm not actually thinking this out very well. No, take it back to undefined. I don't want to do it this way. I want to do it a different way. Okay. And then underneath that, we're going to put number smallest distance. This is a variable. And that is equal to, you're going to see something kind of magical. Player X colon get maximum value. And this is the maximum possible value that a number can be on the system. So this, I'm going to put this code into Zoom and Slack because it's a little weird.
Player X?
Yeah, that's what I named my X value, but it just can be any number. It doesn't really matter. And
Like, because we have a player object, so you want us to get the
not the player object. You just need a number, any number. any number value. So you could make number A equals 0 and use A. But it just has to be some number that it can call this function on.
But why is it maximum value? It seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, because we're looking for the shortest distance, right? So what we're saying if any item has a distance less than the maximum possible value, we're gonna hold on to that one. And so we'll get to that in just a second. I told you this is the weirdest one for the lessons. It's probably the hardest because it's a little weird. Okay. So the next thing we're gonna do, we're going to see, we now have in our loop, we have the distance that we can calculate for each one of these potions. So then what we're going to do is we're going to say is if the distance is less than smallest distance, which it will be at first because that's the maximum value, then we're going to set that closest value equal to the potion that we've just looked at, and we're going to set the smallest distance equal to the current distance. Okay, so I'll explain that as a high level, and then I'll mention the individual lines again. At a high level, what this is doing is this is saying, okay, find all the potions and go through them one by one. For the first one, is the distance lower than the maximum possible number on the system, which of course it will be, because the maximum possible number would be very, very far away, the farthest away that it could possibly be in a computer, right? And so it's going to automatically take the first one as being the closest, but then it gets to the second one and it says, okay, is this one even closer?
Why can't we sort these values?
You could do that too. Technically, that's actually less efficient. A sorting would be n log n steps, and this would be n. So this is faster. But that would work too.
I'm still a little bit confused what's going on here. So you're setting the smallest distance equal player position, get maximum value. That's outside the loop, right?
Yep. You do it
Okay.
once and only once.
Yeah. And inside the loop, what are you doing again here?
I will take my whole function and I will put it up as I'm building it into Slack and Zoom again. So you can dig through it. Because I will read it, but you know how it is, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to miss something. So,
zero, like I said, smallest distance equal to 0 colon get maximum value, or what?
hold on. Let me do one thing at a time.
Yeah, it's going to be your vector colon, whatever the name of your vector is.
Yeah. So mine is smallest number space, smallest distance equals player X colon get maximum value, left and right paren. The point is though, player X is just a number. It's number player X something. And I can call functions or actions on top of a number. I won't get into how that works, but because it doesn't really matter. But you can call actions on top of a number, and one of the actions that's available is get maximum value. And get maximum value just gets you the largest possible number that Quorum can store, which is some giant number.
Did you give the, did you just send the file over? Is that what you did?
I put it in Slack, and then I dumped it into Zoom as well.
Oh, I see what's going on here.
Yeah. So the point, though, is now I've got item closest equals undefined, number smallest distance equals player X colon get maximum value. And then inside of the loop, after I've calculated the distance, I've got if distance is less than smallest distance. In other words, if the distance between me and this item is smaller, go into this if. And then closest equals potion, and then smallest distance equals distance.
Oh, Slack's giving me trouble. So inside your loop, say that one more time here. So I have the distance calculated from the player to the item that we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And then under that, what are we putting here?
Yeah, so then I've got if distance is less than smallest distance. And then I want to set which item it is, closest equals potion. And then I will set the new smallest distance, which is smallest distance equals distance, and then end.
Okay, so if the distance is smaller than the smallest distance, then we want to set the smallest distance to the distance.
Yeah, at a high level, this is saying, hey, if this item is closer than the last one, then keep track of the new closest one. And if it's not, then just ignore it. And check each of them one by one. Now, the reason why you could sort this, but the downside of sorting is that sorting is kind of expensive comparatively. And you still have to do that every single time that you're doing it because the new distance will be changed because the player is moving.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. So a smaller distance is less than, or if distance is smaller than the smallest distance, set smallest distance to distance. And is that it? Should be it.
Okay, now the last thing I'm going to do here, and I'm going to move on just a little bit, is I'm just going to make a speech object for myself because I don't have that in this particular one. And I'm going to just have it say the name of the item that's the closest when it's all done. What is it? Speak or say? Say, right? Yeah, say without blocking. I'm going to say... closest get name. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna put the distance in there too. So the last thing I'm doing is I'm just having a speech call and I'm getting the potion's name and I'm getting its distance and I'm going to output that to speech. Smallest distance. So that way when I press F, I can get back which one I am. And then I'm just going to move my character around on the screen and do that. Now you might need to add other accessibility cues to find them or to move around or whatever you want to do, depending on what you did with your game. But that's the idea. So I'm going to run it so people can see what this is and I'll describe it. Oop, what the hell? My guy disappeared. That was not good. Okay, I've triggered the potions. And on my thing, holy crap. My guy is being all jumpy. Okay, I'm gonna start that over. I don't know if I broke something. It's possible. Ah! What the heck? Okay, fine. What did I do? What's the zoom thing? Okay, so now if I press F,
Blue potion 500 and 1.05267185859384.
cool. That said one blue potion.
Blue potion 100 and 19.10714254994717.
And if I'm close to a different one,
Blue potion 38.127671955553475.
now the point isn't that this is necessarily very accessible. I didn't make an accessibility feature out of this. What I did was I made it so now I can make such a feature. I have an equation or a loop or a system whereby I can go in and I can find the item that's closest and then do something with that information. And so this is often what you do when you make games, whether it's for accessibility or not, is what you do is you end up needing some information that you can use to tell the player something, and then you orally or visually indicate that on the screen. You might add it as a caption for someone that is deaf. You might have it flash visually with a shader in a AAA game. You might have it orally indicate something like a path, all sorts of ways. But the point is, you almost always do the same thing. You figure out some way to calculate something, information you need, and then you indicate that to the player in some capacity so that they can do whatever it is that they need to do.
Now, you were talking about spatial audio, and I'm guessing we're getting into that, which is leading into my question about like trying to place an audio sound. Let's say you press F and it places an audio cue at the place, like where that item's located, or something like that.
Yeah, we will get to that in just a minute. I'm gonna post this final code into the stuff first, so that you can just have it. And so we will get to questions on the spatial stuff first, and we'll look at the audio class in just a minute to do that. In fact, why don't we do that next, I guess. So the last thing that I want to do, actually, let me get questions on this function first. Does anybody have any other questions before we move on to the next piece? Or is everybody kind of getting it, like what you do here to get the distance? Or is everybody just bugger lost?
Yeah, I think I got it.
I think this made more sense than the array thing, but.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, you just need arrays to be able to do it, is really what it comes down to.
I guess
Sort of got it conceptually, but syntax issues. So anyway, that's okay.
We can jump into a breakout room too, that's fine.
I guess the only thing I'm confused about this algorithm is, I guess this get maximum value call up at the top.
So think about this. If you make a number in Quorum, or really most programming languages, or many, I guess, that number is just a value, right? But you can call functions on that value and it will return to you information. And one of those is just saying, what's the maximum one? And that's it.
Which is going to be like, who knows, something in the billions or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
2 to the 64,
Sure.
2 to the 32. I think it's 2 to the 64 minus 1 or something.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we're just setting it to that maximum value as the initial value. And this is for smallest distance.
Yeah, because we know that any of the items are going to be less than the maximum unless all of them are at the maximum value away, which is very unlikely. So
I see. Yeah. Got it. Okay.
We're
just trying to find a value that's going to be bigger than the first value so we can get the algorithm rolling.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
Got it.
Yeah. And the only way this algorithm, this algorithm could fail if every single one of your objects was placed at the maximum value away, and then it would be undefined, but like that ain't gonna happen. So
which I suppose you can just say less than or equal to, I guess, if you want to account for that.
Yeah, that's true. You can say less. Oh, that's true. Then it would be guaranteed to pass. So.
Yeah.
Is there a way to truncate the decimals on that? To make
yeah, for sure. You can take parts of the string and stuff like that, and that would all work, and that would be fine. But my goal isn't to make the interface of the speech good, because like you could totally manipulate that to be whatever you want. I just was showing that you can put something out. So
cool.
Yeah. But yes, you can take the string, take pieces of it, get rid of the decimal point, whatever you want to do, and that would all be fine. You can round it, turn it into a number, change it. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that you could do there to make it have a better interface.
So the magic line in this block is that's closest equals portion. That's every time it flips the the smallest one item to the closest.
Yep, that's it. It flips it anytime it finds one that's closer. It says, "Aha! I have found one."
Yeah.
And then it keeps track of it.
That's cool.
Yeah. And so in computer science, I'll just leave you for this algorithm, this one other little tiny piece. In computer science, we often talk about how fast an algorithm is. And when you think about it, this algorithm is what's called big O of n. And what big O is exactly doesn't really matter for this conversation, but it's basically saying, how many items in this kind of case do I have to search through to do this? And in this case, we say it's n because the array can have any number of items in it, potentially any non-infinite, any finite number of items, and we don't know how many, so we just say it's n. And so this algorithm has to go through the entire array to find the closest one. That's not necessarily bad. It's just the way this algorithm works.
I have a question about, so when you're setting this up and you're saying get maximum distance, I think I have a syntax error where I used player position, which is the vector, which I don't think that's what we want. We want number, the object number, colon maximum value. So do you have static actions in Quorum? Like, can I just say number colon get maximum value?
No, you have to do it on the number value,
Okay.
which is slightly strange. But even though it's a primitive, you can call the action on it, and some magic happens behind the scenes so that it will do that.
Okay, so I just need to say player position get X, get maximum value. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're good. So we actually use some static wrappers behind the scenes to do that and stuff. So it's pretty efficient actually. So it doesn't like autobox or any funny things like that if you're familiar with the concept. So it doesn't do it.
Yeah. Okay.
It just wraps it in a static function and then returns to you the thing. So relatively efficient as efficient as a function call, but that's pretty efficient. So
that's okay. I hate autoboxing.
Yeah, I don't like autoboxing either.
It's so irritating. It's like, I don't know. I love C# because I don't know. You don't have to deal with that. I don't know what they're doing behind the scenes, but
there is all sorts of magic you can do with these things to avoid autoboxing. So anyway, okay. So the last thing that I want to do, and we didn't quite get to the triggered voiceovers request. And so, but that particular lesson, I'll mention briefly what it is, because the spatial sound one took a lot more time. But that's sort of okay. It's the hardest part for the rest. Is what we'll be doing also tomorrow is to finish the game. We'll be finishing off the games however you want your game to finish. So in mine, I made a monster appear and he says silly things. But the triggered voiceover ones, all I really want you to do there is go into Audacity, record voiceovers for your games, and then have them play back as part of your final thing. So when you trigger the quest, it plays a voiceover. And you do that using the exact same audio calls that you already saw earlier. It's just you're recording the voice yourself as opposed to me doing it or downloading the sound. And then for the spatial sound, although we weren't planning on using spatial sound for this one, I want you to explore it. And specifically, I have pulled up the audio class. And what I want to do for this last exercise is I want everybody to spend a minute and then have a discussion on all the functions that exist inside of this audio class and try to figure out which ones you can use for spatial sound. So I'm going to put that into the track here. And there's a reason I want to do this, and it's not just because I want you to memorize these, because I don't. It's not important to memorize these things. What I want you to realize is that you can go to the online documentation. You can look through all the functions that are available in these classes, and those are the things that you just have available that you don't even have to write code for other than making a function call, because it's kind of done for you. So on the screen, and I want you to dig through these, take a look at what you have available and try to figure out which things can you use for spatial sound that are on the documentation page. So let's spend 5 minutes doing that, and then let's have a discussion about it so that we can kind of figure out what you have as an option for doing spatial sound, which you can use later in the lessons. So five minute break, I guess, as you're looking, or 1 minute break, and then 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and have the discussion. Does that sound good to everybody?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm gonna stop sharing because you couldn't see the whole thing from my share anyway. And then I will be right back. So let's have a discussion about I'll give you a second, but when people are ready, let's have a discussion about all the actions that are in the audio class. Let's take a look at what kind of things these things can do, just to get an example of how you read these library pages. And almost any programming language is like this. So. Give folks one more minute. All right, so let's unmute ourselves when we got a chance, and then let's have a discussion. So first of all, who wants to take a crack at which actions do you think are related to spatial audio?
At listener position?
Listener position? Okay.
Enable Doppler and
and what is Doppler, Steve?
Just isn't that like the sound signal going back and forth between two things?
Yeah, it's like adjustments to the pitch as the sound moves, right?
Does it actually calculate how the wave effectively gets observed as being more spread out or compressed?
Sure
does it actually calculate that?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Automatically. Yep.
Well, sort of automatically. If you're using it in an audio 3D and 3D space, it calculates it automatically for you.
Does
in
it
2D,
not?
we don't.
Oh, I guess. Well, wait, but what happens then if you do? Does it not when you move in 2D space?
So the way that it's set up is that the underlying audio engine that we use, OpenAL, has the ability to settle this stuff. And for 2D stuff, it doesn't set it automatically because we don't know what you're intending to do. Using this Doppler stuff is intended for use with 3D audio, whereas in 3D space, we know what you're doing. It's a 3D environment. So we simulate it realistically, and you can attach it to an object, and we automatically update it for you. For 2D, it's up to you to set it manually if you want to use Doppler for your 2D game, because we don't know what your frame of reference is for 2D.
What does it mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, see, this is why it's a discussion, not just the thing. I think you wrote this part, didn't you, William?
Yes, quite a while ago, but yes.
Yeah, I know, right? Quite a while ago. That's true. Okay, but Doppler is there, and you can manipulate it, and it's especially useful in 3D. But whatever. What else? What else is related to
the set position, which is overloaded with X and Y and X, Y, Z?
Definitely related. What else?
There's a velocity, I think, in there as well. Was it listener velocity or some other velocity?
Yeah. So what do these velocity functions do? What do people think these do?
You know, the same way that we are moving graphical objects, we will have to apply the same principles to move audio objects.
Yeah.
So if I attach an audio object to my player, if I'm moving it graphically, like linear velocity, I'll have to do the same thing in audio, otherwise I'll have the same problems.
Yeah, and I was thinking we could work on.
Oh, that's, sorry. No, I told everybody to open their mics, but I shouldn't have. That was my bad.
So with that listener velocity, you have to include that if you're going to use the Doppler effect at all, because otherwise it wouldn't calculate the positional change and the change in the tone, right?
For 3D, and William can correct me if I'm wrong, but for 3D, I think that as the item moves on every frame, it will calculate it for you. Is that right, William?
Yeah, if you create an audio 3D object, the audio 3D object is a sound in 3D space that automatically calculates its velocity in order to be used with the Doppler. If you're doing something outside of the audio 3D object, so you're just making an audio object, these velocity calls are important because audio doesn't inherently have a position. So these velocity calls are what tells the system, hey, this is the direction and the rate at which this thing is traveling as far as the calculation of Doppler is concerned.
Yeah.
Okay. So it would be necessary in two-dimensional space.
Yeah, it's kind of like manually telling it that the car is going by, basically. Is one way to think about it.
It gives you a way to translate whatever you're doing in your 2D environment into 3D audio.
Okay, so there's some simpler ones. Has anybody seen some of there's some simple ways to controlling audio. Anybody see those?
I mean, set balance, you can put it on your right or your left side, depending on where the thing is.
Directly.
Yep. Set balance is a really good one. It's a nice way it's also very simple to use because you just set the position. And what are the parameters here? It says number, but when we use when we use audio, almost always the values go between what and what?
This will be -1 to +1.
Almost always with audio systems, you use -1 to 1. Now, why is that? I don't know. It's just a convention that kind of stuck around in computer science for a while. So like if you pull up like SuperCollider or some of the Max MSP or any other audio applications or programming languages, it's almost always the same, like -1 to 1 for whatever reason. So
there's even a set volume.
There is a set volume. Yep. Any others related to spatial audio that you see that are useful? I think that's about it. There's fade.
Yeah, the set fade was if you have forward and back channels. So like if you had front speakers and back speakers, right?
I think that's what it is. Is that right, William? I think that is, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. So you have basically for, aside from just manually setting the position of something in 3D space, if you have something that has surround sound, you're basically making use of the balance for your left, right, and your fade for your forward and back.
Yeah, that's right. But isn't there some way, you can make audio samples with 8 channels if you have such a speaker, but does OpenEL support that? I forget.
I believe that OpenAL will translate your 3D positional audio into a system that has that many channels. We don't have specific helpers to do that in the same way that we do for balance and fade, though.
Right, that makes sense. In any case, so the idea is that there's quite a few options just out of the box for handling this. Now, of course, you have full access to the audio system. So if you wanted to like write your own custom digital signal processing equations to do all this stuff, you totally can. But besides just having that capability available, you also have some functions for balance and fade and pitch and that kind of stuff. And that gives you quite a few options for controlling things in your game in such a way that you can get spatial audio and use it either just in general or for accessibility or whatever you want. Now, I think that this will be especially fun once we finish the 3D system for the visual editor, because then you should be able to, in theory at least, hook up sounds to your 3D items, move them around, and then it'll be really easy to add Doppler and stuff like that as well. For 2D, you can still use balance and fade and stuff, but nonetheless, I think that it gets really fun when you hook this up to your 3D system, but maybe that's just me. In any case, so that's the discussion at the end of spatial sounds, and I want to do that discussion first. But at this point, we're almost at the end of our 4-hour dingy bob, or time period. So I'm gonna let people feel free to ask questions, and then once we're done there, then we'll head back to the other room. So are there any questions about anything we've done today?
I have a question.
Do it.
What if I wanted to add a sound effect to, let's say, let's say the Questmaster or something, and I wanted it to just make a continuous sound, but I wanted it to have spatial audio. So I wanted to sit out on the map so that I could find it by its, whatever noise it's making. But, it's the sound that it makes is relative to, where the player is.
No problem. That's actually relatively easy to do. So what you would do there is first you would load a sound. So like music : load,
Sure.
And then you would enable looping on that sound. You would enable looping.
Okay.
And then in your update loop, that happens per frame. You would adjust its balance and its fade in the update. And then it will do that automatically. I suppose we could do it really quick. Let's see here. So if I have...
How do you, while you're showing that, how will you adjust the scale?
The scale?
You're going to have coordinates, right? When he's moving his player.
Yes. The scale, sound doesn't really have scale, so I'm trying to figure out what you mean.
No, what I mean is, suppose I have a position, say 0,5 and 3,3.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make the sound or adjust the balance based on these coordinates.
Mm-hmm.
So won't I have to translate these coordinates to the -1 to 1 number space?
Yes. Yes, you do. So one way that you could do that is you could, there's a couple ways that you could do it. One is you could determine from the X coordinates and just do it off X. That's one way that you could do it. If you're in 3 space, you might be able to calculate a vector, like the direction from it, and then calculate it from there. If you're in 2 space, you could put fade to Y and then have it be either you're above it or below it, and then that's your fade, and then translate to 0 and 1, so normalize. Or you could also do it same with left and right. So there's a bunch of ways you could do it, and that's actually what makes 2D kind of a little bit tricky, is that what does it mean for the sound to be playing if it's far away? Like, is it so far away that you shouldn't be able to hear it or not? Whereas the nice thing about 3D is that if you just make an assumption, like every 1 point is a meter, then you can have a nice physical analog for both physics and for Doppler and stuff like that. But in 2D, you kind of have to make it up, and it depends on how you want to map it in your head. So
can we do the, like, just kind of old mathematical way that you basically, get the player's coordinate X, Y,
mm-hmm.
and then the items coordinate X, Y,
Mm-hmm.
and then lambdas, maybe the, one of the trigonometry, sine function on it.
Oh, yeah.
And then, if the sign is minus negative, you would make the balance to the, such and such direction, or, whatever you wants to do, lower pitch. If it's minus, it's a lower pitch. If it's positive, it's a higher pitch and stuff like that.
Yeah, see, I love this because that's almost always the idea of what you do in programming is you figure out some kind of a mathematical construct that you think will help you decide your problem. And then once you have that mathematical, my children are literally banging on the door, I'm sorry. Once you have that mathematical construct, then you can translate that into some kind of audio or speech or whatever it is that you're doing. Yes, I can see that, buddy. That's great.
And she has poops.
Oh, she has poops. Thank you for explaining that to the entire group. I'm very sorry. And she bit you. Good. Did you guys want to know that? That sounds really good.
was that the puppy?
No, that was my 2-year-old. So.
2-year-old.
That happens.
Farted, had poops, and bit.
Hi. Let's say hi. You've already done. Okay. She's now a kitty. So. Okay. Well, in any case, the point is exactly like that. You can use trig, calculate the distances, and then map them to 0 and 1. You can just take raw X coordinates and do stuff like that and make kind of a primitive thing. And which one you choose to do, hey guys, can you be quiet, please? Which one you choose to do in part depends on, I hate to say it, probably how old you are, right? Like if you're a kid and you're 12 and you don't really know how to do, you don't have like a lot of math under your belt, it's okay to just kind of experiment and fool around with it. Or if you're, if you're a co and like you're comfortable with trig, or if you're comfortable with calculus or some other crazy stuff too, that's okay. And you can use that kind of things too. And you can get, you can get slightly more sophisticated ways of handling this as well. But the point is, again, map it to math and then map it to whatever you want, whatever the audio system wants from there.
Right, so there's in the audio class, there's a set X and Y.
Yep.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, and so it's giving you an X, Y, Z, and you can use those. And that's obviously for 3D, but if you just lose a dimension, you lose a dimension, and that's okay. It's just making certain assumptions about what those are. So you might have to manipulate them in 2D, but nonetheless, you can definitely use those too. So. Okay, so that's a brief introduction to spatial audio. We haven't programmed anything yet, but we are kind of out of time too. So, so I'm gonna, if there any more questions before I dump us back to the main group?